Hello and welcome to the Microsoft Azure Training Days Fundamentals event. This course will cover foundational knowledge of cloud services and how those services are provided by Microsoft Azure. As we move from parts 1 to part 2, we'll cover cloud concepts, cloud models, Azure resources, Azure core services and solutions, and key services such as security, privacy, compliance, and trust. We'll wrap up with pricing and support. As you can see, we have a lot to cover. This course will prepare you to write your AZ900 exam and obtain your Microsoft Azure Fundamentals certification. So let's get started. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Lorraine Lawrence, and I'm an Azure Technical Trainer based in the Toronto, Canada office. It is both my honor and privilege to be here with you today as we go through the Fundamentals course. The course has 6 modules. Module 1 will be Cloud Concepts. Module 2 will talk about Azure Core Services. Module 3 is all about Solutions and Management Tools. Module 4 will look at Security and Network Security. Module 5 will look at Identity, Governance, Privacy, and Compliance. Ending off with Module 6, which is Azure Pricing and Lifecycles. Let's start by talking about the exam. This course maps directly to the AZ900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. The questions are pulled from a pool of hundreds of questions, and you're given 60 minutes to write the exam. The exam will be multiple choice, and there will be no labs. If you look at the chart in front of you, the approximate weight of the subject matter is indicated on the right-hand side. The higher the percentage, the more questions you'll likely see on the exam in that area. If you're new to the cloud, I suggest you supplement this learning with a little bit more study. We have a wonderful Microsoft Learn course which maps directly to this course with extra reading materials, outside links, case scenarios, and quizzes. I highly recommend it. Let's begin with Module 1, Azure Cloud Concepts. In Module 1, we'll look at cloud models, including public, private, and hybrid cloud. We're going to look at cloud benefits and considerations and look at why customers are moving to the cloud. And then we're also going to look at cloud services and a term called shared responsibility. Cloud models. In cloud models, we're going to define what cloud computing is. We're going to look at the public, private, and hybrid cloud models, and then we're going to compare the 3 models together. So what is cloud computing? It's the on-demand access to a shared pool of computing resources. They are normally located around the world, and these resources can be anything from servers, networks, storage, database, applications, etc. The resources that you use can be provisioned and released with minimal effort. You don't need any deep technical skill to use the public cloud. Public cloud. It is owned by a cloud services or hosting provider. They provide resources and services to multiple organizations and users. These users normally access the network via a secure connection, typically over the internet. There's no deep technical skills required to use the public cloud, and the service is usually available to everyone, the public. So private cloud, on the other extreme, is owned by an organization. It is normally only limited to that organization, and the organization is responsible for everything, from actually purchasing the hardware, to the updates, to the networking and the security, everything. The organization does not normally allow public access to their resources. It is normally private. And then we have hybrid cloud. It is a combination of public and private cloud. The organization decides what resources they're going to put in the cloud and which ones they're going to keep in their own private cloud. Deep technical skills are required to maintain the private cloud and also ensure that both clouds can operate together efficiently. There is flexibility. The organization decides what is in the private cloud and what is in the public cloud, and they're able to meet any compliance regulations regarding security or data requirements. So let's take a look at the 3 models again. Public cloud, we talked about that. The organizations pay for only what they use in the cloud. It's available to the public, and there's no capital expenditure needed to scale up resources. The other extreme is private cloud, where the hardware has to be purchased by the organization who is running that cloud. Deep technical skills are required for the maintenance and updates of this private cloud. The organization normally has complete control of the resources and do not let the public access it. And then there's hybrid cloud, the most flexible of the three cloud models. The organization will determine which applications and resources run where, meeting any data requirements and compliance regulations they need to meet. So let's take a look at cloud benefits and considerations. Cloud benefits. We are going to look at some key terminology regarding the cloud. We're also going to look at capital expenditure and operational expenditure. And we're going to look at what a consumption-based model is. So why is everyone moving to the cloud? There must be a reason. The 8 terms in front of you are probably the biggest reasons customers are moving to the cloud. Let's start at the top. High availability. What is that? It's the ability to keep resources up and running for long periods of time with very little downtime. Then there's scalability. So we have 2 different terms, scaling out, which is horizontal scaling, which means adding more resources or servers or virtual machines as you need them. And then there's scaling up, adding to existing resources either by adding more CPU or adding more memory. Global reach, another big benefit of the cloud, is being able to access resources and put your resources around the world. And then agility, the ability to react quickly to workload demands. Do you have a sudden spike in traffic? Do you need to allocate more resources? Or do you have a sudden slowdown and need to deallocate resources? Fault tolerance is that ability to remain up and running if a component or service has a failure or no longer working. We all know what it's like to when you turn on your computer and you have that tap, tap, tap noise, meaning your hard drive is not working. Well, in the cloud, there's all sorts of ways of protecting yourself against that. And then we have elasticity, similar to scalability, but I want you to think of elastic band. So an elastic band, when you pull it, when you release it, it goes back automatically. That is elasticity, the ability to automatically increase or decrease resources as needed. Customer latency. You want to be as close to your customers as possible to reduce the latency for them accessing your resources. So now with the cloud, with that global reach, you can put resources around the world, putting them as close to your customers as possible. And then predictive cost. It goes with a calculator we'll look at later, helping you determine the actual cost of what you're going to spend in the cloud before you spend it. No one wants that surprise bill at the end of the month where they thought it was a certain number and it's double or triple. In the cloud, you're able to quote what you're going to spend before you actually spend it. And that we'll take a look at coming up soon. Let's talk about expenditure models. We have capital expenditure, or CapEx as it's known, is the upfront spending of money on physical infrastructure. When we needed to create our own data center, we had to get budgets approved, buy a space or have a location, go out and physically buy those resources, and then network them all together, put them all together to build our own data center. So that's a capital expenditure model. In the cloud, we don't need to do that. We are spending as we need it, and that's operational expenditure, OpEx. So the expenses are normally deducted in the same year, and you're paying monthly or yearly for those expenses. So capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. Consumption-based model, another huge benefit of the cloud. Previously, when we used to have our own data centers, we'd have to plan for those spikes in traffic in the data center when we're actually building it. So most data centers would run at 50 to 60% of their actual capacity, having room for that spike whenever it happened. In the cloud, we don't have to spend that money up front, and we don't have to plan for that in advance. We use the resources as needed and pay as we use them. Think of it like your utility bill. You have a meter on it and you pay by what you actually used. The same thing in the cloud. You're paying by what you actually use. And if you don't need a resource anymore, you can deallocate it or remove it from the cloud. So let's talk about cloud services. Cloud services. We actually have 3 different types of cloud service models. The first one being IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. The second one, PaaS, which is platform as a service. And then we have SaaS, which is software as a service. Each contain different levels of managed services. You can use a combination of these types of services depending on what you require. For example, you can use Microsoft 365 for your company's computers, which is SaaS. In Azure, you can host your VMs, which are an IaaS model. And you can use Azure SQL database, which is a PaaS model, to store your data. The cloud gives you that flexibility, and you can use any combination you choose. It's important to understand these different service models because they're used in conversation, documentation, and training. After that, we'll also talk about what a shared responsibility model is. Infrastructure as a service. So what is it? It's basically the paying for resources as you need them. So it's like renting servers and virtual machines in the cloud, and you're paying by what you actually use when you need it. Think of that meter again on your hydro. So in this case, infrastructure as a service, you're going to rent servers, you're going to rent the firewalls and security, and you're renting the physical data center or the building, and you put all your resources on top of that. You load your own virtual machines, you choose your storage, you choose your operating system, all from that cloud solution provider. In the platform as a service model, the cloud solution provider is responsible for everything apart from the customer's own application. They are responsible for managing the server, the infrastructure, the operating system, the network, and even the service configuration. This model provides an environment for building, testing, and deploying software applications without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. It allows your company to be more efficient and more productive. And then we have software as a service. Users connect to and use cloud-based apps over the internet, for example, Microsoft Office 365 and calendars, and they're basically renting that software monthly or yearly. The cloud solution provider, so in this case Microsoft, would take care of everything else. So the servers, the networking, the operating systems, the physical buildings, development tools, and even the hosted applications and apps. Summarizing the three cloud service models, we have the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models. In IaaS, I want you to think of the word flexibility. Microsoft, the cloud provider, configures and manages the hardware running underneath your application. You, the customer, selects the operating system and the hardware. A good example of an IaaS resource is virtual machines. In PaaS, I want you to think productivity. The customer focuses on their application development. The platform is managed by the cloud solution provider, which is Microsoft. A good example of a PaaS product is app services or containers. And lastly, we have SaaS, which I want you to think of the word subscription. It's a pay-as-you-go pricing model, monthly or yearly, and I want you to think of Microsoft 365, email, calendars, or tools such as Teams. Remember, you can use any combination of these infrastructures. We've just reviewed the cloud service models, and remember, it's all about control. You choose the level of control you want. The shared responsibility model in front of you goes hand in hand with these cloud service models. Let's take a look. When you look at on-premises, the very left on that chart in front of you, that's our private cloud. That customer is responsible for that entire stack you see in front of you. So everything in green from storage all the way up to data and access, the customer is responsible for. Moving to the right, the infrastructure as a service model, Microsoft manages the compute, networking, and storage, which is the physical hardware. And the customer manages their data, applications, runtime operating system, and virtual machines. Moving to the right one more time at platform as a service, the customer focuses on their applications and data. Remember the productivity model, and Microsoft manages the infrastructure underneath. For the very last model, the software as a service, the customer manages their data and access, and Microsoft takes care of everything else. For all cloud deployment models, you're responsible for protecting your security of your data and your identities, your on-premises resources, and any cloud components you have control of, which vary by service type. We've covered a lot of foundational knowledge in this module, including cloud models, the benefits of cloud, and different levels of cloud service. In Module 2, we'll begin narrowing our focus to Microsoft Azure. We will start with Azure regions worldwide, and then we'll begin introducing you to core Azure resources. We'll look at Azure architectural components, looking at regions and availability zones, then moving on to core resources such as compute, networking, storage, and databases. Starting with regions, I want you to take a look at the map to the right-hand side. Take a look at those blue dots around the world, and those blue dots represent regions, Azure regions. We have over 60 regions located globally, as you can see, representing over 140 countries. Azure actually has more global regions than any other cloud solution provider. That blue dot, which is that region, represents a collection of data centers. It can be from 1 to up to 16 data centers. These regions help organizations meet their data residency requirements, which we'll talk about coming up. When you select a region, you want to select it as close to your customers and users as possible for that low latency we talked about earlier. It's important to note that not all regions have the same features built in, since they were created and built at different times. Now let's go a little bit deeper. We're talking about region pairs. So like those blue dots, they have region pairs, which means two blue dots in the same geography, separated by at least 300 miles of separation. These are automatic region pairs. So it's very important when you plan your deployments to pick automatic region pairs wherever possible. For example, if I was deploying my resources in East US, I'd want to pick the automatic region pair in the West US. So if there ever happened to be a wider Azure outage, one region out of every pair would be prioritized to help reduce the time it takes to restore data and applications. So you want to make sure you're in those automatic pairs. When Azure plans updates, they are rolled out to one of the region pairs at a time to minimize any downtime and risk of application outage. These region pairs are 300 miles apart for data protection. And then we have availability zones. They are built to protect against downtime due to a data center failure. So when we refer back to that map, that blue dot, we are looking at an Azure region, so like the diagram onto the right-hand side. And inside that region, we could have multiple availability zones, up to 3 actually. These are physical separate data centers located within the same region. Each one of these data centers is equipped with its own independent power, cooling, and networking. And they're connected together with private fiber optic networks, so there's very low latency between them. So if one region happened to go down in this example, let's say availability zone went down, availability zone 2 would be fine because it's independent. As a reminder, not all regions have the same availabilities. You want to make sure they have the architectural structure you need before deploying your resources. So let's take a look at an availability zone in Dublin, Ireland. So this is Azure's facility in Dublin, Ireland. I'll give you a second just to look around. There's lots to see in this picture. Let's start off with the physical structure. As you can see, we have a fenced wall that goes around the entire structure, all the way around, and that's for security. So we want to prevent people from coming in. So adding to our security, we have some physical security. So there's this gate here. We've got security cameras, and if someone was trying to ram the gates, let's say, even if they got past here, they've got to go through a round driveway, so they're not building up any kind of speed. They're going to come around here, have to make a sharp left to be able to get in, so they're not building up any kind of speed. That's meant for security. You can see there's not a lot of parking. It's because we don't want a lot of visitors. It's not open to the public. If you get a chance to go to a data center, you're invited. Please go, because it's very rare to go actually see a data center. If you're not on the list to go to see a data center, you will not go in. You can't knock on the door, buzz security, and say, I think I have some things in here. I just want to take a look around. We're not letting you in. It's meant for the protection of all our customers inside this data center. So you can see by the size of the cars in relation to the building how big this facility is. We've got 3 different colors of buildings here. We've got this blue one up front, this mainly white one back here, and then another blue one back here. So you are actually looking at one availability zone with 1, 2, 3 data centers. So these data centers have their own heating, cooling, and networking, and there's power generation sources here for the buildings. And there's actually a physical gap between these 2 buildings. You can't see because of this high wall, but you can see this one a little bit more. There's a physical gap here between these 2 data centers. There's also some power sources over here for these data centers. So remember, if this one happened to go down, these ones are independent of each other and they would still operate. So this is the Dublin data center. This is actually 3, 4, and 5 data centers out of almost 15 in this area. to give you an idea of the size of these data centers. So let's talk about availability options. In the cloud, we have a lot of flexibility to plan for backup and resiliency in case there's a data center failure or some sort of issue. When we talk about availability options, we want to make sure we're getting as high a 9 as possible. So starting on the left-hand side, I've got one single VM, and it's a 99.9 uptime SLA, which is a service level agreement, with premium storage. But that's a single machine. If I wanted to do better on that number, I'm going to go to the right-hand side, and I've got that same VM with an SLA of 99.99. So it's a higher SLA because I'm distributing that VM and its backup across availability zones. Remember, that's separating themselves from each other, independent power, cooling, and networking in a region. Moving over one more time to the right. So if I'm dispersing my virtual machine across multiple regions, I'm going to get even higher SLA because I'm diversifying and spreading out my risk. So in this case, on the right-hand side, I'm looking at region pairs. So remember, 300 miles apart minimum is the region pair rule. We'll talk about that in further details in another module, but I just wanted to introduce that concept. We're having a plan for backup, plan for resiliency, and that's the benefit of the cloud. It's easy to do. Now let's start talking about Azure resources. So in the cloud, what do we put in the cloud? We, of course, build our environments. We build our applications. We put our databases there. And these are some of the resources we have available. We've got, of course, virtual machines. We have storage accounts. We have databases, app services, functions, many different resources in the cloud. So you pick and choose what you need to run. And then we have resource groups. So we have those resources on the previous slide. We want to make sure we're grouping them into some sort of logical group. It could be by project type or project lifecycle, which is normally the preferred way of doing it. So when that project is ended and you no longer need those resources, you can deallocate them off the cloud, and it's easy to do. Other companies put all virtual machines together and all storage together and all their web and databases together. So different ways of organizing. You as a company should organize how you're going to do it. Resources, so if I had that virtual machine or that app, can only exist in one resource group, but that resource can be anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in the same region as that resource group. You can move resources between different groups if you needed to, and applications can access multiple resource groups. They don't have to be in one resource group. We're also going to talk about role-based access coming up, and that's ways of securing your access to those resources. Now let's talk about something called Azure Resource Manager, or ARM for short. ARM, or Azure Resource Manager, provides that management layer that helps you create, update, and delete resources within your subscription. The best benefit of it is it allows you to automatically deploy and configure resources using different automation tools and scripting tools such as Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, or Command Line Interface, the Azure Portal, REST APIs, and client software development kits. Automating the creation of resources help you maintain consistency and standards across your deployment. So suppose you have several business units around the world and they require 10 identical resources. You can use an ARM template or Azure Resource Manager template to deploy those resources consistently. So that's one of the benefits of using an ARM template. Then we have Azure subscriptions. An Azure subscription provides you with authenticated, authorized access to Azure accounts. In the diagram to the right-hand side, you can see we have in blue an Azure account, and underneath it we have 3 subscriptions. I want you to think of subscriptions as the billing account. So take out the S from subscription and put a $ there. So the bill would come to dev, would come to test, and would come to production in this example. So the billing account is a subscription, and it's an automatic billing boundary. It's also an access control boundary as well, where you can access and manage control to those resources within a certain subscription. An account can have multiple subscriptions like you see in front of you. We're going to jump into the portal and take a look around. So let's go. Here we are in portal.azure.com. Let's take a look at what the portal looks like in Azure. Starting from the right-hand side, we're going to make our way left as we cover all the buttons we pass. So hovering over, this is my account. It tells me my email address, my directory, and also my domain. Moving towards the left, I've got a happy face. So that's my feedback icon. I can give feedback on wherever I am in the portal. If I find this page confusing to understand, give us that feedback so we can use that to improve our products. Moving over to the help, the question mark, I can get help and support starting here. There's also a lot of links below and guided tours that you can take from here. Going over to the cogwheel icon, let's click on that. That's the portal settings itself. So this, what you see in front of me, is my home page, which is right here. I can also switch to a dashboard view as my home page. So whatever I choose, I prefer what I see right now, but you can use dashboard view and I'll show you what that looks like coming up. I also have an option to have the portal menu as a flyout or docked. I prefer flyout so I have more real estate on the page, but you can have it whatever way you choose. You can also choose between different themes, and you can select here high contrast, white, black as well. Moving over to notifications, when you see a number there in red, it means you have not seen something in there. So maybe you went to lunch and came back. There might be something you hadn't seen. That's just alerting you about that. Moving one more over to the Directory and Subscription tab, I can filter between what subscriptions I want to show up when launching the portal. You can see I have many subscriptions down below. I'm going to keep HR tests because I'll be using it all throughout the day. This next button on the top is called Cloud Shell. It's a greater than symbol and an underscore is what it looks like, but it actually pulls up a scripting environment right inside the portal without us having to go anywhere. It's very handy. Moving over one more time to the left, I've got the search bar and I start to type in a word and it starts to filter in services, resources, marketplace, and there may even be a video or two that pops up that helps guide me through what I'm trying to do. Moving one more time over to the left, that's my portal menu that we talked about earlier. You can see what's in there right now. I've got some favorites, as you can see there. Let's take a look at the favorites. I'm hovering over function apps. That star on the right hand side means it's a favorite. If I remove that star by unclicking it, you'll see it will disappear from my menu. Looking at other things in that portal menu, if I hover over virtual machines, I can see recent resources I've created, even some free training from Microsoft and some useful links along the bottom. Hovering over load balancer is another one. I can see description. It describes what it does. Let's go to virtual networks. It shows me recent resources I've created in virtual networks. So this menu is really handy. Let's go take a look at dashboard. That's the other home page I have an option to have. As you can see, I've got a few resources here. I've got some quick start and tutorials in the center there. I've got metrics. I don't tend to use a lot in this demo account, so it's pretty empty right now. I can set up time zones, users and groups as well. I can also put help and support or any other metrics I'm trying to track. This could be your home page. Remember, we just have to set it up in the portal settings. If I select edit, a graph paper shows up and I can move these features around to make my dashboard. Continuing on to back to the portal, I can see all the other resources I have in front of me, including the most recent ones I've created. I can go to all resources and take a look at all the resources in my subscription. If I go to all services, these are services that are offered by Microsoft. On the left-hand side are all the different categories, and featured ones are on the right-hand side, and there's even some video training, as you can see down in the bottom. If I click on storage accounts, I can go in and actually create a storage account by just clicking add and continuing from there. Starting with Azure Compute Services. So what are compute services? They're basically on-demand computing services that provide computing resources such as disks, processors, memory, networking, and operating systems. We've got virtual machines, we have app services, container instances, Azure Kubernetes service, and Windows virtual machines. We're going to go into each one of them in a little bit more detail coming up. So starting with virtual machines, what are they? They're software emulations of physical computers, so virtual. They include a virtual processor, memory, storage, and networking. If you remember our IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models, this one is an IaaS offering. It gives the organization total control and customization ability. And we should also mention virtual machine scale sets at this time. Remember that automatic scaling we first talked about, one of the benefits of the cloud? Well, virtual machine scale sets allow you to automatically manage fluctuations and workloads in the cloud. Remember that elastic benefit. It's still an IaaS model. There's no pre-provisioning of the VMs required, but you can plan for them to scale out and scale in as needed to manage demands and workflow. Here I am in the portal, and let's get started creating our virtual machine. So I'm going to create the virtual machine, and then I'm going to connect to that virtual machine, and then install a web server role, and then test it. Let's get started. So I'm going to create a new resource. I can also go to virtual machines, or I can also look on the left-hand side here and look for all services, and then compute. And these are all the compute services. We're going to touch on some other ones later. Let's start with virtual machines, clicking on it there. And I'm going to go add a virtual machine. And it pulls up a graphical user interface that will walk me through the creation of my resource. So let's get started. On the Basics tab, which is where we are right now, I'm going to slide down so you can see a little better. We've got these tabs going across the top. They also will repeat across the bottom. Starting with my subscriptions, we're going to talk about subscriptions. That is your account where the billing goes to. So you want to put those resources into a subscription account. I'm keeping the one subscription, and I'm going to use that throughout my demonstrations. But now we need to start by creating a resource group. We talked briefly about resources and then resource groups. So I want you to create your resources, preferably with the same life cycle. I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group for this demonstration. And I'm going to call it my resource group VM. The name is available because it's in green. You can see that right here. I'm going to go ahead and create. Sliding down so you can see a little bit better, just moving down to the bottom. Next thing I need to do is create a name for my virtual machine. So what name am I going to give it? When you create your names, I want you to pick something that's meaningful for you and your organization. For my demonstrations, I'm really going to pick a really simple name because I'm going to delete it at the end of the day. So let me go and create a name. I'm going to call it my VM3. Okay, so make sure you pick a name that makes sense to you. Mine are really simple. And because I'm in Toronto, Canada, I'm going to pick a region closest to me, or one of the closer ones. I'm not going to pick Asia. I'm going to go over actually to USA East, or East US. Sliding down again, giving you a little bit more visibility here. Something we talked about very briefly, we talked about availability zones. If you recall, that region, the blue dot on the map, has many availability zones inside of it. So I can choose that as my resiliency plan, or there's something called availability sets. We didn't really talk about it, but it's another way of protecting yourself, and they're putting your virtual machine on different servers and different racks in the same data center. So those are availability sets. Different from availability zones, we're actually separate data centers. As I mentioned before, not all regions have the same availability. So I'm going to switch this so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go to Canada Central, or Canada East, let's pick. We're going to go look at that availability options, and you can see availability zones is grayed out. So in this, I only have an option to pick availability sets. Okay, so every region is different. Make sure you research your regions before starting to put your resources in there in case there's a particular feature you need. So I'm back to USA East. I'm going to keep these off for now. Don't have to pick them. There's no asterisk there, so it does not mean it's a mandatory field. And I'm going to pick an image for my virtual machine. This one's going to be Windows 2019 Data Center. So I'm going to pick this one here. There's many other private images. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So there's a lot of images here. There's a particular build you want, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, I'm going to pick something simple, keeping my 2019 data center. Spot instance, that's your chance to save some money if you've got something that's temporary. We tell you not to put anything production on there, but if you have, maybe you're just running a few tests for a couple weeks, so use a space on our server for very cheap. Spot instance tells you right there. Discounted rate versus the pay-as-you-go price, and has to be tolerant to infrastructure loss, so we may need that space. As you'll notice, there's an information icon beside everything. Hovering over gives you information about what they're talking about, what they're looking for as an answer. Okay, so I'm at size right now. I'm going to keep mine pretty basic. As you can see, there's a price here right beside it, and that's part of that predictive cost. So I know what I'm going to spend per month on this virtual machine, and it tells me how many hours as well. So I'm going to let you see other options. These are the ones I tend to use more often. There's many more sizes. I'll let you take a peek quickly. So there's more sizes here. I've filtered between certain gigs, but you can see very much more. Let's go down and scroll. A series, I've got D series, B series, E series, and I'm going to show you pricing just so you understand what we're talking about. It can go in the thousands of dollars, depends on what you choose. Okay, that predictive cost. Going back over, I'm going to not pick any of these. I'm just going to pick my default one, which is the D2S version 3. So I have 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of memory. Now I've got to choose my administrator account, sliding down so you can see my administrator account. Let's call it Azure Admin. And I need to choose a password. So it meets all the criteria for my password, between 1 and 20 characters. It doesn't have any special characters, and it's not a reserved word. Now in the password, I'm going to go pick a password. I want to show you something. It does not let you pick the word password. That is a reserved word. Will not let you choose it. And it has to be between 12 and 123 characters long. So I'm going to hide that. I'm going to put in my real password. There you go. It's okay. Confirming that password again. They match, so I'm good to go. Sliding down a little bit more. Now we're at inbound port rules. So as I mentioned before, we're going to connect to this virtual machine, so I need to have some public inbound ports open. So I'm going to make sure I'm allowing ports, and let's go through and choose. I'm going to definitely RDP to it, so I'm going to put that on, and I've got HTTP as well, port 80. So I've got 2 ports open, as you can see, and I'm allowing access because I want to check and connect to this virtual machine. That is allowing IP addresses to access my virtual machine, which I'm trying to do. And it gives me a warning that there is public access to my VM, which I want. Sliding down a little bit further. Licensing, so if I bring my own license, you're going to talk about that when we go through the cost calculator. I'm saving on the licensing fees, which if I have a license, I will definitely bring it. I don't have one, so I'm not going to click that box. But there's a way to save up to 45% or 49%. Moving over to disks. So I'm going to choose premium storage, but I have other options. Premium storage with only one virtual machine running, no backup into an availability zone or an availability set, gives me a 99.9 uptime SLA. And we'll talk about that coming up. So I'm keeping premium storage. Scrolling down a bit more, I'm going to go into networking next. And I want to make sure I can connect to my ports. Scrolling down so you can see it a little bit better. So a virtual network is going to be created, a subnet will be created, and I'm going to get a public IP. Let's check the ports that I have open. I have to make sure both of them are selected, so RDP 3389 and HTTP 80. Warning me again, it's going to allow public access to my virtual machine, which I want. We'll talk about load balancing coming up. It's not part of now, but you have that chance to load balance across various machines if the load increases. I'm not going to touch that. We're going to go down to management. Going to turn off boot diagnostics for now because I don't need it. It's a demo machine. Let's take a look at this screen a little bit closely while we're here. I have an option to auto shut down. So suppose I'm working on a test project and I don't want it running over a weekend, or maybe the office is closed for a few weeks. I can actually shut down that virtual machine, and I can set the shutdown options. Clicking on it briefly, show you what that looks like. I can shut down, say, at 7 p.m. Do I want a notification before shutting down, and who does that notification go to? I'm going to turn that off for now, but that's where you'd find it. I can also enable backup and start that. I'm not putting that on right now, but I can set that up right while I'm setting up my machine. Going to advanced. Going to leave everything as is. I don't have any extensions, anything else I'm loading. It's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to review and create. Oh, let's go to tags too. I mentioned before that my subscription is a billing account. If I have multiple projects and multiple resource groups in the same subscription, I may want to divide up that bill by tagging the resources in it. And that's where I come into tags. I can put a name for my tags. I can say maybe HR. So this belongs to the HR department. And I can maybe call it project ABC. So I can filter by that project. So that tag will stay with this at the end of the month when I've got several pages of bills or many bills. I can divide it up by project ABC. So let's go ahead, review and create the options I've created, sliding down below. It's verifying that everything makes sense and there's nothing that's unusual. Giving me that predictive cost, as you can see here, it's 24 cents an hour for that virtual machine. So everything is passed, the validation is passed, and I just want you to take a look at this part down here. It's download a template for automation. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about ARM templates. But if I had a lot of complicated choices I made along the way, I may not want to do this every single time when I'm creating a virtual machine, so I could save that template to reuse again and again. I'm not going to do that because my options were quite simple, but I'm going to go ahead and create. As you can see, it's starting to work and create. It's also moving up here, warning me something is going on. So it's really going to quickly create. Okay, so my resource is created. I can either go here or the other spots. I'm just clicking on the top one. I'm in my virtual machine called Virtual Machine 3. It is running. It's in East US. So it's ready to go. Just sliding down so you can see a little bit more. So now I want to connect to this virtual machine, and then I'm going to load a file. So let's go to connect. I'm going to connect through RDP because I opened that port. And I'm going to download the RDP file. File is downloaded. Okay, it can't verify the identity of the connection, the remote connection. I know it is, it's me, so I'm going to connect. I need to sign in as another user. Signing in as in a different account. So remember, Azure admin is what I used. Putting in my password. There you go, and I'm going to sign in. So it can't identify the remote computer I'm connecting to. That's okay, I'm going to go ahead. And I'm getting into my virtual machine. So here I am in my virtual machine. I'm going to go now connect to PowerShell. I'm going to go down here and look for PowerShell. There it is there. I'm going to go run PowerShell. Here I am in PowerShell. I'm going to install the web server feature in the virtual machine now. So I'm going to paste the commands I've got ready. So it's install Windows feature. The name is web server and including management tools. Selecting enter, it's going to run. There you go. So it's finished installing my web server role. You can see success is true. So now I'm going to go back into my actual portal and take a look and connect to it. Back in the portal, I'm at my virtual machine. It's Virtual Machine 3. It is running. And I want to now connect to that virtual machine by going to the public IP address on the right-hand side here. I'm going to copy the IP address to my clipboard, create a new browser window, paste that address in, and there you go. I'm connected to that virtual machine. So we just came back from the portal. We created a virtual machine where I had to pick the resource group, name the VM, and then I connected to that VM through RDP. I loaded a web server image, and then I also tested to see that I could connect. That was one type of compute resource. There's another type of compute resource options, and they are called serverless computing options. So serverless computing is different from virtual machines where it doesn't need storage and an operating system to run. They run as needed, when needed. So they are that PaaS service, the middle model of the three services, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS that we talked about. So it's a PaaS service, and the first one we're going to look at is called Azure App Services. They're a fully managed platform to build, deploy, and scale your web apps and APIs quickly. They work with .NET, .NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python, or PHP. Remember, this is that PaaS offering, so they're cheaper to run, faster to run as well, and you're just paying by that short usage time. Now we're looking at another serverless compute option, which are called functions. What functions are small pieces of code that you can launch without worrying about the application infrastructure. Think another PaaS offering. A function is triggered by a specific type of event, such as changes in data, responding to messages, running on a schedule, an HTTP request, or even an event triggered by another SaaS application. They're designed for short run, and they're little tasks that are stateless. In simple terms, logic apps provide automated access and data across clouds without writing code. Every logic app workflow starts with a trigger, which fires when a specific event happens or when new data becomes available. Many triggers provided by the connectors in logic apps include basic scheduling capabilities, so you can set up how regularly your workloads run. Remember, part of the serverless compute option, these two tools run instantly in short bursts. And now we're going back to look at serverless compute options. Azure Container Instances are a lightweight virtualized environment that does not require that operating system the virtual machines need, and they respond to changes on demand. So ACI, or Azure Container Instances, are preferred ways to package, deploy, and manage your applications. You simply call the ACI endpoint, and the ACI service takes care of managing that infrastructure for you. Again, it's a PaaS offering, if you remember the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models. So they're quick to run, very economical, and they run for you. They're taken care of for you. With ACI, you can choose to have them event-driven, but you can also have them sit there and be long-running. They can run for hours, days, weeks, or months. Basically, they're containers that you spin up or down as you need to go. You can deploy public and private Docker images, which are stored in registries to your container, and we'll look at that in the next demonstration. And then we have something called Kubernetes service, and it's a type of orchestration service to manage these containers. So when your applications start to grow, you've got multiple containers across multiple servers, operating them becomes a more complex issue. That's when you can use Kubernetes service. In simplified terms, you would use AKS for running multiple containers with sophisticated orchestration, managing rolling upgrades, automatic scheduling, and automatic scaling. To help you remember the word Kubernetes, I want you to think about a large container ship traveling across the ocean. The captain of that ship normally manages the placement of those containers because he is in charge of that ship. The word Kubernetes, loosely translated in Greek, means captain. So that may help you remember the word Kubernetes. We are going to go back into the portal to deploy an Azure Container Instance. Configure and deploy a Docker container to an Azure Container Instance, and it's going to display a hello message on an HTML page. We're back in the portal, and we're going to create, configure, and deploy a container instance using Azure Container Instances. The container itself is a Welcome to ACI web application that displays a static HTML page. Let's get started. So in the portal, I'm going to search for containers, and I'm looking for container instances right there, clicking on it. Let's go ahead and add. We're going to create one. Similar screen shows up. Just going to scroll down. Basics, I'm putting it in the same account. Resource group, I'm going to create a new resource group for this one. Okay, make sure your naming convention makes sense. I'm going to scroll down so you can see. There we go. Yes. Scroll down so I can see a little bit better. I have to pick a container name, and I'm going to use that is available. It's between 1 and 63 characters long. Region, again, I'm going to keep all mine in East US. There I go, right there. Scrolling down a little bit more, and I'm going to use that Docker Hub. It's going to be publicly accessible. And the image I'm going to use is the Hello World image. Okay, that's an image I have available. It's going to be a Linux OS. I'm going to keep the size default. I'm not going to play with that. Going over to networking. I need to choose a DNS name label, and it has to be globally unique. So let's find a name I can use. That name is available. Scrolling down so we can see. And I'm going to leave everything else the same. Going to review and create. Looks like the validation has passed. I'm going to go ahead and create. Again, I can save that template. Going ahead and creating. Okay, my resource has been created. Let's go to resource. I'm in my container resource instance here. I'm going to close this window right there. It's there. It is running, as you can see, in East US, and there's my container resource group. And I have nothing going there as yet. As you can see, I have no activity. So now I'm going to look at the fully qualified domain name, which is here, and I'm going to connect to this container. Copying that here. Going to the browser, pasting, and I've now connected to that container. With the shift to remote work and working from home, having access to a great computer is a must. But buying, provisioning, and securing and shipping this computer and maintaining it is an IT department's worst nightmare. What if a company could purchase a virtual desktop in the cloud for each one of their employees, and that could run on a standard OS with a standard set of applications and be managed and maintained remotely? That is what Windows Virtual Desktop is. Windows Virtual Desktop gives you the flexibility of virtualization for a wide range of computing solutions, which support Linux, Windows Server, SQL Server, Oracle, IBM, SAP, and more. All current generation virtual machines include load balancing and auto-scaling at no cost. We have many networking services in Azure, the first one being Azure Virtual Networks, which enable many types of Azure resources, such as virtual machines, to securely communicate with each other, the internet, and on-premises networks. A virtual network is scoped to a single region. However, multiple virtual networks from different regions can be connected together using virtual network peering. We also have Virtual Private Network Gateway, VPN, which is a distinct type of virtual network gateway that sends encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and an on-premises location over the public internet. It provides a more secure connection from on-premises to Azure over the internet. And lastly, we have Azure Express Route. It's a dedicated private connection from your on-premises location to Azure through a direct link that you would set up with a connection provider. It can be expensive. You would pay a flat rate or by traffic volume, and it's meant for large enterprise customers who need the speed and secure connection. We're back in the portal at portal.azure.com, and we're going to do our next walkthrough. In this walkthrough, we're going to create a virtual network. Then we're going to create 2 virtual machines, and we're going to have one ping the other one. So let's get started. So we need to start by creating our virtual network. I'm going to go search for virtual network up here. And as you can see, it was also one of my favorites, one I've used recently, so it's there as well. So I'm going to click on it here. And I'm going to go to add and create that virtual network. I'm going to use the same subscription. I'm going to create a new resource group. So make sure your naming convention makes sense to you and your organization. So I've created my resource group. Let me name my virtual network. That name is available. I'm going to choose the region closest to me. Like all my demos, I'm going to use USA or East US. Going over to the IP addresses. I'm going to continue to use the default one. I'm not changing that. I'm not changing anything else. I'm going to use default settings for this example. There's tags again. We talked about tags, tagging your resources for the billing. I'm going to review and create. So validation's passed on the very basics I put in. Let's go ahead and create. As you can see, it's starting to deploy. That was nice and quick. I'm going to close this down. We're going to go to that resource. Let's just make sure it's running. So it's my virtual network 2. That's what I named it. It's in East US. That's the resource group I just created. So it's there. So let's start by creating my virtual machines. I'm going to go look up here for virtual machines. There it is right there. Clicking on it there. Going ahead and adding virtual machine. Sliding down so you can see my screen a little better. I'm going to find that same resource group because I'm going to put the 2 virtual machines into the same resource group. So I'm going to go look for it here. There it is. Remember, I'm picking a simple name. Make sure your name makes sense to you. That name is available. East US again, sliding down. I'm going to change the image to Windows Server 2019 Data Center. Sliding down again. I'm going to keep the size the same. I'm just going to use the default. I'm paying $175 a month if I'm using this one. I delete at the end of the day, so I'm not worried about the cost. Going in and adding my admin account. Adding a password. Confirming that password. Sliding down a bit more. Now we've got to look at the port rules. Which ports am I going to allow access to my virtual machine? So I'm going to pick selected ports because I want to be able to ping them. So I need to put a selected port. I can't choose none. And let's see my options here. So I've got HTTP 80. I've got HTTPS, SSH, and RDP. So we're going to use RDP for this example. So I've kept that highlighted and it's chosen. And it's warning me that this IP address will allow access to my virtual machine, which I want. Sliding down a little further, going to disks. I'm keeping the defaults again just to make it easier. Premium SSD, remember that gives us a 99.9 SLA. I'm not going to worry about anything else here. Going to networking. I've chosen the virtual network I'm using. I'm going to keep the subnet, the default, the public IP default as well, not changing any of these. Making sure my RDP port is still selected. Okay, and I'm not choosing a load balancing option for this one. Going over to management just so we can see. I'm going to disable boot diagnostics. And I can worry about these later. This is just getting us up with a virtual machine and virtual networks. Going to review and create right now. Looks good. Let's go ahead and create now. This is my first virtual machine in my virtual network. There you go. My resource has been created. I'm going to go to resource just to verify. So this is my first virtual machine that I just created, VM3. It's running and its location is East US. So let's create another virtual machine. I'm going to go up to here. Virtual machine is here, so I'm going to select that. Go ahead and add. We're going to do the same thing with another virtual machine, sliding down so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to put it in the same resource group. So I'm looking for my resource group, virtual network, and it's 2. There I go, right there. And I'm going to name this virtual machine. So very easy for me. So I have virtual machine 3, and now I have virtual machine 4, keeping it in the same region. I'm going to use the same image again. I'm going to go to my 2019 Windows Server. That's my size. It's fine. I'm going to go add my administrator account username. Typing in a password. Verifying that password. Sliding down. Again, I need inbound port rules to say allow selected ports because I'm going to ping these machines. They're my options again. I'm just picking RDP. Everything else is the same. I'm just going to show you just so we know. Premium SSD. Going to the networking options, I'm going to keep the default. It's using the same virtual network as if you remember, VNet 2. Keeping all the other settings as default, so the subnet, the public IP, It is warning me that all IP addresses will have access to my virtual machine, which I'm aware of. Let's review and create. First validation is passed. I'm going to go ahead and create. So let's go to that resource. I'm going to verify it's running. So this is VM4, and it's in the same resource group. I'm going to search for the first one I created, so it's VM3. Let's take a look. There it is. I'm going to go take a look at that. Remember, we checked it's running. I'm going to connect to this virtual machine or try to connect. So I'm going to go to connect. And I'm going to do an RDP connection. And I'm going to download an RDP file. File is downloaded. Let's open it to connect. It is warning me that this publisher of this remote connection cannot be verified. Do I want to continue? And I'm going to say yes, I'm aware. I'm going to sign in with my admin account. Put in my password. It's warning me again, it cannot be verified, the identity of the remote computer. I'm aware, I'm going to go in. Here I am in my virtual machine 3. Let's go in. I'm going to get to PowerShell, searching for it in the bottom here. There it is there, and I'm going to sign in as admin. Here I am in my PowerShell session. It's just starting up. There I go. And that's my user that I'm signed in with. So I'm going to now try to ping the other machine. And if you recall, that was VM4. So I'm typing ping VM4, enter. So request timed out. Timed out again. So it's timed out. It sent 4 packets, so it's not able to connect. And the reason why it's not able to connect, Windows Firewall by default blocks ICMP requests. We're going to have to go back into that virtual machine and allow ICMP requests. We're back in the portal now, and I'm going to go to my VM4. Let's search for it. There it is. Now I'm going to connect to this virtual machine, and then I'm going to allow ICMP requests. So I'm going to connect, RDP, download the RDP file. There it is there loading. Let's open it up. Again, it's giving me that warning. The publisher of this remote connection cannot be verified. I'm going to connect. I need to sign in again. Again, another warning. The identity of the remote computer cannot be verified. I'm going to continue. Here I am in virtual machine 4, so let's run PowerShell again. I'm going to run as admin again. Here I am in PowerShell. I'm now logged in as admin user. I'm going to paste in that command that will allow that ICMP connection. So I'm allowing a new net firewall rule. Display names allow ICMP4. Taking a look at what we see, it has been enabled. Now we're going to go back to the virtual machine, first one, virtual machine 3, and we're going to ping it again. I'm back in the portal in VM3, and I'm going to connect again using RDP to my virtual machine, and then I'm going to ping virtual machine 4 again. I'm going ahead, open that file, sign in. Going back to PowerShell, signing in admin. So let's try again to ping virtual machine 4. As you can see, it connected with virtual machine 4 4 times. 4 packets sent, 4 received. So because I allowed that ICMP connection on virtual machine 4, I'm now able to connect. Congratulations! We've just successfully completed this lab. We created a virtual network, created 2 virtual machines in it, tried to ping the first one. It did not let us because of the Windows firewall security. So we went ahead and allowed an ICMP connection to that virtual machine, which was virtual machine 4, and I just pinged it and it connected. We have a variety of database services in Azure, including Cosmos DB and SQL databases. Cosmos DB is a globally distributed database service that enables to elastically and independently scale throughput and storage across a number of Azure geographic regions. It's a non-SQL database. It allows you to take advantage of very fast millisecond database access using your favorite API tools such as SQL, Cassandra, MongoDB, and Gremlin, and it's the first and only service to offer 5 nines SLA. And then looking at our SQL database offerings, we have Azure SQL Database, which is a relational database as a service based on the latest stable version of Microsoft SQL Server. It's a high-performance, reliable, fully managed, and secure database. Azure Database for MySQL is a fully managed SQL relational database service for app developers based on the MySQL Community Edition. And then we have Azure Database for Postgres. It's a relational database based on the open-source Postgres database engine. We also have an Azure Database Migration Service. The Database Migration Service is a fully managed service designed to enable seamless migrations from multiple database sources to Azure with minimal downtime. Many organizations have SQL databases on premises. What if you could move those SQL databases into the cloud without having to touch the code, structure, and security? And what if that cloud database ran the same SQL software and was managed, patched, and maintained for you by Azure? That is Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. The goal for SQL Database is to provide customers wanting to move to the cloud with as close to possible zero-friction platform. It has a 99.9 uptime and a 99.99 parity with the on-premises SQL Server because it runs on the same source code. So instead of worrying about the expense to re-platform an application and database to run in the cloud, you could just move it to Azure SQL. Azure Managed Instance combines the broadest SQL Server database engine compatibility with all the benefits of a fully managed evergreen platform. SQL Managed Instance has a near 100% compatibility with the latest SQL Server database engine, Enterprise Edition. It provides a native virtual network implementation that addresses common security concerns and a business model favorable for existing SQL Server customers. It allows SQL Server customers to lift and shift their on-premises applications to the cloud with minimal application and database changes. At the same time, SQL Managed Instance preserves all PaaS capabilities, including automatic patching, version updates, automated backups, high availability, all of which drastically reduce management overhead and TCO. The last thing we need to cover in this module is the Azure Marketplace. What is Azure Marketplace? It's where you can find, try, and provision Azure applications and services from certified service providers, Microsoft partners, independent software vendors, and startups. We have close to 10,000 products in the marketplace. Let's go take a look at where we can find it. We're back in the portal and we're going to look for a marketplace. Let's go search it up here. There it is. Let's click on it. So here is the marketplace. And here are some of the categories of the products we have. You can click on any one of them. Let's start at the top, maybe compute resources. And if I'm looking for a particular build of something I'm using, you can go more and more and more. You just keep looking. There's 10,000 products in here, products and services in here. Go back to some maybe database tools. Go into machine learning. Okay, that's Marketplace. You can search right at the top, and that's where I found it. Let's begin. Module 3, Azure Solutions and Management Tools. We have several Internet of Things offerings, including IoT Central, IoT Hub, and Azure Sphere. IoT Central is a fully managed global IoT solution. It makes it easier to connect, monitor, and manage your IoT assets at scale. There's no cloud expertise required. So you can bring your connected products and devices faster to market while staying focused on your customers. And then we have IoT Hub, a central message hub for bi-directional communication between your IoT applications and the devices it manages. Use IoT Hub to build IoT solutions with reliable and secure communications between millions of IoT devices and a cloud-hosted solution backend. You can connect virtually any device to your IoT Hub, and it handles massive amounts of data. And then we have IoT Sphere, a comprehensive IoT security solution including hardware, an operating system, and cloud components. It includes Azure Sphere certified chips, Azure Sphere OS, and Azure Sphere Security Service, which monitors threat detection. Use the IoT product selector to determine what product best suits you. Azure Big Data and Analytics. Azure Synapse Analytics provides limitless analytics and brings together enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. It accelerates time to insight from all data at any scale across data warehouses and big data analytics systems. It combines the best of SQL technologies using enterprise data warehousing, Spark technologies used in big data analytics, and pipelines to orchestrate activities and data movement. HD Insight is a fully managed open source analytics service for enterprises. It's analytics at large scale. It is a cloud service that makes it easier, faster, and more cost-effective to produce massive amounts of data. HD Insight allows you to run popular open source frameworks and create clusters such as Apache Spark, Apache Hadoop, Apache Kafka, Apache Storm, and machine learning services. And then we have Azure Databricks, a collaborative Apache Spark-based analytics service. Use it to set up your Apache Spark environment in minutes, auto-scale, and collaborate on shared products in an interactive workspace. It supports Python, Scala, R, Java, SQL, as well as data science frameworks and libraries including TensorFlow, PyTorch, and Scikit-learn. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Machine learning is a predictive intelligence that data scientists and data engineers use to speed up the slow training process and tedious deployment tasks. Machine learning provides a cloud-based environment to develop, test, train, deploy, and manage machine learning models. You can use the service to auto-generate a model and auto-tune it for you. Use it to start training on your local machine and then scale out to the cloud. If you're new to machine learning, get started without writing code using Machine Learning Studio. It's a collaborative drag-and-drop visual workspace where you can build, test, and deploy machine learning solutions and predictive analytics solutions without needing to write any code. Go from idea to deployment with a few clicks. You can also integrate our many Microsoft services to build a more intelligent business application. Cognitive services. You can use AI to build business impact, bring computer vision to your business, or add a human touch to your online interactions, spot anomalies, or extract information from data. No machine learning experience is needed. And then we have Azure Bot Services. Provide an experience that feels less like a computer and more like dealing with a real person or at least a highly intelligent robot. Shift simple, repetitive tasks, such as taking a dinner reservation or gathering profile information, onto automated systems that no longer require direct human intervention. A bot interaction can be a quick question and answer, or it can be a sophisticated conversation that intelligently provides access to services. Azure DevOps Services provides development and collaboration tools, including Azure Repos, Azure Pipelines, Azure Boards, Azure Test Plans, and Azure Artifacts. GitHub provides hosting for software development and version control using Git. It provides access control and several collaboration features, including bug tracking, feature requests, task management, and wikis for every project. And then we also have GitHub Actions for Azure. It's automation tools to build workflows from GitHub to Azure automatically, using an open source version of DevOps repository. It makes it easy to automate all your software workflows, build, test, and deploy your code right from GitHub. And then we have Azure Dev Test Labs, which allow you to quickly create development and test stages using reusable templates. You can use pre-created images, minimize waste with quotas and policies, and minimize costs by using automatic shutdown. Starting with Azure Management Tools. We were in the portal before where I gave you that demonstration. We also have PowerShell, which we've used a few times. We've got the mobile app, command line interface, REST APIs, and Cloud Shell. Azure PowerShell is a set of commandlets that allow you to manage Azure resources directly from the PowerShell command. CLI is a cross-platform command line program that connects Azure and executes administrative commands on Azure resources. Azure Cloud Shell is that browser-based scripting environment in the Azure portal that we've used before. It provides flexibility by allowing you to choose your preferred shell experience. Linux users can opt for Bash, and Windows users can opt for PowerShell. And then we have the mobile app. You can diagnose and fix issues quickly, run commands to manage your Azure resources, and you can also run ad hoc Azure CLI or PowerShell commands straight from the mobile app. Azure Resource Manager allows the automatic creation of resources using different automation and scripting tools such as Azure PowerShell, CLI, the portal, REST APIs, and client software development kits. Azure Resource Manager. I showed you in the portal when there was ways of saving that template. Those are called ARM templates, and they allow that automatic deployment and configuration of resources quickly, consistently, and fast. If your company had several business units that required 10 resources of the same type, you would use Azure Resource Manager templates to create this. That would ensure you have consistent deployment across your environment. So I'm back in the portal and I'm going to create a VM using PowerShell. If you recall, Cloud Shell will take me into that browser environment, so I'm going to click there. And since it's the first time I'm launching PowerShell, I have to set up storage. It says I have no storage mounted. So I'm going to go find an account I can build my storage to. And I've been using HR Test. Go ahead and create storage. So I'm creating a storage account where I can store my code. There we go. Just going to move it up so we can see a little bit better. So I've requested a Cloud Shell environment. It's succeeded. It's connecting to the terminal now. So I want to make sure I'm using PowerShell in the top left here. So I'm going to switch to PowerShell. It's warning me I'm switching. I'm going to confirm I'm switching. And it's connecting me again, as you can see. Okay, when you see this, you know it's ready to go. I'm going to place in some code I have ready, and it's going to create a new resource group, name the resource group, and pick the location, which is East US. So there it is, my resource group name and my location. It's succeeded, as you can see. So I'm going to verify that that resource group was created. Paste that code here, and what am I looking for? So it's get resource group. I want to make sure I can see that resource group created. As you can see from the table, it's showing me what resource groups I have created. in this description, and you can see the one we've just created at the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and paste some code I have ready to create that VM. Pasting it here. You can see it's called new AZ VM, my resource group, location, subnet security, etc. So I need to put a username. And put a password. And it's creating those resources. As you can see, it's completed here. Let's go look for it. I'm going to search for it. It's called My VM PowerShell. There it is. So it's the one I just created. It is running, as you can see here. So let's jump back into the Cloud Shell and execute a few commands. Making sure I'm in PowerShell here, giving us a chance to reload. So I'm going to confirm some information about my virtual machine. I've got some code here I'm going to paste in. Let's take a look. So get AZVM. The name is My VM PowerShell. I want to find that status and put it in a table. So there it is. It's showing me it's in my resource group PowerShell. It is running, as you can see. So let's go and stop this machine. I've got some code ready for that again, pasting that in. So I'm going to stop this VM. Let's enter. It's asking if I do want to stop it, and I'm going to say yes. So why? You can see it has succeeded. It stopped my VM. Let's verify it has stopped. And as you can see, it's been deallocated or stopped. Okay, let's close this down. So I've just stopped my VM. Going back into the portal, I'm going to refresh. And you can see it has stopped. So while we're in here, I just want to review advisor recommendations. I'm going to go and look for advisor. This is Azure Advisor. Microsoft takes a look at your deployed resources and makes recommendations based on best practices in categories such as reliability, security, performance, cost, and operational excellence. As you can see, they're in categories in front of me. Just sliding down so you can see. I've got 44 recommendations in security. Some are high impact, which is red. I've got medium impact, which is yellow. And I've got low impact, which is blue or green. I've got some reliability recommendations as well, a couple in operational excellence, and some in performance, or one in performance. If I go to security, I can click on that category. Drilling down a little further, I can scroll through and see my impacts. I've got some quick fix buttons as well. Let's log into one of them. Clicking on it gets a little deeper, tells me what the issue is, and I can look at remediation steps as well. Going back out to Advisor, let's look at operational excellence. I've got two here, a high and a low impact, so I've got two there. The low impact one says create an Azure Service Health Alert, so I can do that for sure. And that's two recommendations under operational excellence. So these are my deployed resources. Azure goes in and looks at best practices, sees ways they can help me save money, look at performance issues, and it's meant to help me out. I can also go into Service Health from here. Service Health is basically the health of Azure resources and data centers around the world. You can filter by subscriptions if you're in many different subscriptions. I've got quite a few on. I can take a few off if I want. So I can just click my main one, which I was using HR Test. Maybe I put a few other ones so I can see what's going on around the world. I can pick the regions I want to be alerted for. Scrolling down, I've got all the regions here. So right now I've got 17. I can add a few more if I've got more resources in those areas. And I can also select by service. So I'm going to select all services because I want to be alerted for all services in those areas. I can see if there's any planned maintenance coming up, and there is one. And I can also look at health history. These are issues that would have happened in the past. I can click on, for example, monitor. Tells me the issue, what was impacted, summary of the impact, preliminary root cause, and mitigation. So that's service health coming back out. These are Azure resources around the world and the health of those resources. Another free resource we have is Azure Monitor. As soon as you launch a resource in Azure, launch a VM or set up a database, we're starting to collect metrics and log information. Metrics are telling you how your resource is performing, and logs record when the resource is created or modified. And we're using those metrics to tell you how your resource is performing, how much the resource is consuming, for example, network bandwidth or consumption, and we can also add monitor agents to collect this operational data for your resources. In applications, we're monitoring data such as the performance and functionality of the code you've written, regardless of the platform. Looking at resource monitoring data, we're looking at the operations of the resource itself and giving you recommendations. Azure Subscription Monitoring is telling you about the operation and management of the Azure subscription, as well as data about the overall health and operation of the resource itself. You can also set alerts. In Module 3, we covered Azure Core Solutions, IoT, Machine Learning, and Cognitive Services. Each one of these topics are their own multi-day course. We wrapped up by looking at Monitor and many ways to manage your deployments. This concludes Part 1 of this course, where we covered cloud concepts, the benefits of the cloud, Azure regions, Azure Core Solutions, ending with management tools. Thank you for your participation today, and we look forward to having you next time for Part 2.
So as you are setting up security within your Azure environment, it's important to know what you need to protect your resources. Let's go ahead and jump into the portal really quick. You had an opportunity to explore the portal yesterday with Lorraine, but I would like to go to the Security Center. So you have a couple of options the way that you can get there. Again, you can either search it from the portal menu, all services, the search bar up here. But the nice thing is the Security Center will be on your toolbar on your main home page. So let's go ahead and go to the Security Center. And this Security Center overview is going to be for the subscriptions that I have selected. So just remember, you can see your directory up here and what subscriptions I currently have. So I am going to choose to look at our Contoso hotels. So let's go ahead and filter to that. And what it's going to do is it's going to provide me with an overall security score. And you can see it's based off of policy and compliance, our resource hygiene, threat protection, and so on. Now, for the exam, you won't have to go in and identify any issues or how to figure out how to remediate them. More, I just wanted to show you what you can find in here. So for example, if we wanted to go down to our resources, security, and hygiene, we can actually see, wow, there, according to the recommendations from the Security Center, we actually have 71 unhealthy resources. Let's take a look at what they might be. All right, so as we go through, we can actually see we have some vulnerabilities. Now, for example, we want to do a vulnerability assessment done on our SQL servers. And you see this little button here that says Quick Fix? The great thing about the Quick Fix is it will automatically go through the remediation steps for you. So you don't have to do anything at all to follow through on that remediation. Now, once you see the remediation steps, you can see the logic, so the quick fix, the logic behind it, or if you wanted to take the steps yourself, you can do that here through manual remediation. Now, with any of the recommendations in the Security Center, whether they're policy or security hygiene recommendations, it is up to you whether or not how you would like to address them. As with anything with Azure, whether it's Monitor or the Security Center, all of this here is to give you support and It's all based off of the best practices from Microsoft. But again, this is a really great tool, especially as a little bit later in this module, when we take a look at governance, your policy score here will let you know where you are with any of your other compliance offerings or where you are with your policies that have been implemented. We'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. All right. So for the Security Center, just know that this is really your hub for everything that's security related within your Azure environment. And if you do enroll in the standard tier, you can also connect that to your on-premise environment. All right. So again, with the Security Center, you have your policy compliance, you're getting your continuous assessments, and the tailored recommendations. I think that's probably my personal favorite part about Azure Security is it's all tailored recommendations to what I have deployed, and it's protecting me against potential threats. All right. Next, we have Azure Sentinel. And this is really great because think of this as a bird's eye view across your entire enterprise. So really, what it's doing is taking all of this history and experience that Microsoft has in security and putting it to work for you in your own enterprise. So it allows you to implement threat detection and your responses through artificial intelligence. So that way you're not having to maintain any type of infrastructure setup and maintenance with security. So it can be elastically, so remember it's automatic, so you can elastically scale to meet your security needs while still being mindful of costs and in some ways lowering costs. So the way that this does this is it's actually collecting data from across your entire enterprise. So there's a number of connectors here, whether it's Office 365, Azure Active Directory, Advanced Threat Protection, or the Cloud App Security. It is collecting data everywhere. Now, once it detects that threat, it has that AI built in through the investigation and detect phase where it's looking for that suspicious activity and then it's responding through that automatic protection. So it's taking a lot of that work and maintenance off your desk and moving it towards the artificial intelligence that's built into Azure Sentinel. All right, so just know that Azure Sentinel is basically, imagine as a big giant dome protecting your entire enterprise and any other thing that might be connected to your cloud products. All right, so those are two of the ways that you can protect yourself globally within Azure. Now let's talk a little bit, how are you protecting your secrets, your certificates, any type of keys? And that's where we get into Azure Key Vault. Now, Azure Key Vault is a centralized location within Azure where you can store all of your certificates, your keys, passwords, anything like that. And then you get to control who has access, who has permission, and you can actually see the log of who's accessed it and when. Now, when we think about when you might use this, one of the things is if you have any controlled access to tokens, passwords, certificates, APIs, or any other secrets that your organization uses, instead of having to share what those are, you can actually build a secret key, then that can be used in templates. So yesterday with Lorraine, when you built out that virtual machine, you saw that you can download the JSON template. If you were to download that JSON template directly from after she created it, you would actually be able to see the username and password right in that template. And that's not so secure, is it? If you have a standardized password that you use for your virtual machines, that's not something you necessarily want to share. But instead, you can share, you can set up a secret key through Azure Key Vault that will then be loaded into that JSON template. That way, other people can take advantage of that template without knowing any of your passwords. All right. So key thing for this is that you get to monitor the access and use of anyone who is downloading or accessing these company secrets. You can control who can see what. And it's really great because you can integrate Key Vault with other Azure services, whether it's a storage account, container registries, event hubs, and so many more. So what I would like to show you just real quick is how you create a key vault with a secret. All right, now that we're back in the portal, remember Key Vault is just like any of our other services. You can choose to access it from the portal menu, the search bar. I happen to have it in my recents, so I am going to go ahead and select Key Vaults and then add. Now, like any other service, we do need to select our subscription as well as a resource group. I'm going to create a new resource group because everything we do here today will be on the same lifecycle. So I like to keep everything organized by lifecycle. Now, as far as the Key Vault name, it does need to be globally unique because again, that's how the key is going to be pulled. So I'm going to name this AZ900 Key Vault Demo. All right. Again, you will use your own naming convention. So this is just one that I'm using for the purpose of the test. As far as my region goes, I'm going to select East US, and then pricing tier, I'm going to select standard. This is premium is if you wanted to use the HSM backed keys where you're not sharing that with anyone else. But again, for the purpose of this demo, we're going to just stick with the standard pricing tier. For the AZ900 level exam, you won't need to get into the access polling networking. I do always like to point out that you can add tags. Remember when we looked at the virtual machines yesterday, you have the option to add tags, which is just that name value pair, adding that metadata, really good for billing and reporting options. So let's go ahead and move into validation, and we're going to select review and create. Give me an overview of everything. We have that option for that JSON template if we'd like. I don't need it here, so let's click create. Now that deployment is automatically in progress. The Key Vault isn't very complicated, so we'll just give it a minute here to deploy. All right, and our deployment is complete. You see I got it up in here in my notification bar, but because we didn't leave the deployment page, I'm going to go ahead and select Go to Resource. Now we are in our Key Vault now. We have a couple of options when we are uploading any keys, secrets, or certificates. And you can see we have our options here underneath settings. Now I do want to point out one thing with certificates. One of the great benefits of it is that it makes it easier to enroll and renew certificates from public certificate authorities, and it allows you to scale up and replicate in different regions that actually use any type of standard certificate management tools. I'm not going to get into much more detail other than that, but just know if you do use those certificates, Key Vault is a great solution for you. Let's go ahead and select keys, secrets. And I am going to select generate or import. And this is where I am going to create a new key. So I'm going to call this AZ900 secret. All right. And the value, I have our super secret value here. And I can say super. So I have our super secret value. All right, having fun with this, of course, you would have your naming convention and it wouldn't be as simple as this, but this is where you can select an activation date or an expiration date. I'm not going to do that here, but if I only wanted this secret to be available for maybe the next week, I can choose to set that expiration. All right, it's enabled. I'm going to click create. All right, the AZ secret has been created. Let's go in there. Now, when we see the current version, you can see I have my secret identifier here. And part of the reason why I needed that unique value is you see in the URL here, this allows me to share the secret with the applications that need it without actually giving away what the super secret value is. Now, because I am an admin in this account, I have access to this button that shows secret value. If I did not have the right permissions or the access within Azure, I would not be able to see this. But I'm going to go ahead and show the secret value. You can see Azure is the best. So that was the secret value I did for our demo. But now what it does is the Azure Key Vault has logged that I have revealed the secret value. So if maybe I was doing something less than good and I was collecting those values, this would actually log, and if I wanted to as an admin go in, I could see it. So that is the key vault. The key thing for the exam is make sure that you know that it is for secret management, key management, and certificate management. Moving right along to some of our other security options, the last one I talk about before we get into securing your network is going to be the Azure dedicated host. Now, what this is, it's a service that's actually providing a physical server, and it can be hosting one or more virtual machines, but it's only dedicated to a single Azure subscription. Remember yesterday when Lorraine went over with you with the cloud computing basics, that is where you were just looking at public cloud computing, is that you are renting that physical infrastructure from a cloud computing provider. And they are providing that physical infrastructure to multiple customers. Now, depending on the security or the needs within your environment or for your resources, you may want to look into an Azure dedicated host. Now, the dedicated hosts, what they are is they're the same physical servers that are in the Azure data centers, but it is just for your subscription. So you can provision this dedicated host within a region, an availability zone, or a fault domain, and then you get to choose to place VMs directly into those hosts, and then you get to set up what any configuration that you like that best meets your needs. Now, this is really good for a couple of reasons. This provides isolation at the physical server level, so no other VMs are going to be placed on that host. So they're all deployed in the same data center, they share the same network and the underlying storage. So this gives you a lot of control on the physical host level. Same thing with maintenance, it gives you control over maintenance. So part of the benefit of using a cloud service provider like Azure is that you're not responsible for that ongoing maintenance. However, while the majority of maintenance has very little impact on your virtual machines, there are some sensitive workloads where even a second of pause can have an impact. So with these dedicated hosts, you get to opt into a maintenance window, which can potentially reduce the impact to your service. And then the last thing is, one of the benefits is that you can bring your own licenses using the Azure hybrid benefit. So again, using the hybrid benefit provides you with cost savings and allows you to take advantage of existing Windows and SQL licenses that you can bring to Azure. Just the one thing that I do want to make sure that you know, if you are wanting to use a virtual scale set, they are not currently supported on those dedicated hosts. But if you do want that control at the physical level, definitely take a look at Azure dedicated hosts. So we've had an opportunity to look at some of the security options within Azure. Now let's talk about how you secure your network and how you're protecting your resources. So before we can get too deep into that, I want to introduce you to a concept called defense in depth. And what this is this is a strategy that employs a series of mechanisms that are designed to slow the advance of an attack that's aimed at acquiring unauthorized access to your information, your data, your resources. But think of it this way. Each layer provides protection, so even if one of these layers is breached, there's a layer right below it to help prevent any further exposure. Now what Microsoft does, it applies a layered approach to security both in the physical data center and across all of the Azure services. So really, the objective in defense in depth is there to protect and prevent information from being stolen from individuals who aren't authorized to use it. So what you can see here is that on this graph, data is the final layer. So you have all these layers starting with physical security that even if one layer is breached, you have the next layer protecting it. And that's really how you want to look at defense in depth. Now, Azure has a lot of tools and services in place to help protect your data, but I want to make sure you understand that security is a shared responsibility. Now, how much of that responsibility falls on Microsoft versus how much falls on you as a customer? Well, that depends on what type of cloud service that you're using. So when we look at the shared security model for security, you'll see that there's some overlap from when we looked at it from the version of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS that Lorraine covered yesterday. Now, in your on-premises data center, you are responsible for everything from the physical data center all the way up to the data and governance. Now, when you start to look at IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, specifically starting with infrastructure as a server, that's, where you are leveraging the lowest level of service, and you're just asking Azure to create virtual machines and virtual networks. So at this level, it's still your responsibility to patch and secure your operating systems and software, but you're also responsible for configuring to make sure that your network is secure. Now, you're asking Azure to just take care of the physical level. So you're asking them to protect the physical host, the physical network, and the physical data center. But outside of that, you're responsible for everything else. Now, moving to platform as a service, you're outsourcing several of the security concerns there. So Azure is taking care of the operating system and most of the foundational software like database management systems. And with here, everything is updated with the latest security patches. And you can even integrate it with Azure Active Directory for access controls. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But because you're not building out the entire infrastructure, you're doing more of that point and click or running automated scripts, you're able to bring very secure systems up and down and scale them as needed. But you'll notice the application protection, it's actually a shared responsibility. So it's not a full pass off to Microsoft. Whereas with the operating system, yes, PaaS, you're no longer worried about the underlying operating system. But you do still have some shared responsibility with the network, the application, and the identity and access. And then finally, with software as a service, you're outsourcing almost everything. So here in this case, they're taking care of the security with the application, the network controls. But again, you have that shared responsibility with identity and directory infrastructure. But I want you to look closely at this graph. No matter the cloud deployment type, you always own your data and your identities. And you're responsible for helping secure those data and identities. And I just want you to know, regardless of whatever type of deployment that you select, you are always going to be responsible for the data, the endpoints, accounts, and account management. So it is a shared responsibility when it comes to security, but those 4 points are always going to belong to you. Now, looking back at this defense in depth, I'm going to focus first on the perimeter layer, the network layer. So we're going to talk about the how to protect your network first. So one of the first ways that you can protect your network is with network security groups. And essentially what network security groups do, it allows you to filter traffic to and from your Azure resources on your virtual networks. And that's the key thing here. This is traffic that is already on your virtual network. All right, because we are on the network level and it's protecting it to and from. So what you can do is you get to choose to set inbound and outbound rules that are filtering on a number of different levels, whether it's destination, the IP address, the port, and the protocol. Now, you get to add multiple rules. There are a whole bunch already automatically configured in your Azure environment, but you get to add more as you need them. Now, you cannot delete rules, but you can override them. So, rules with a higher priority will override rules with a lower priority. So for example, let's go ahead and jump into the portal. I'm going to go ahead and go to my virtual machine. And let's go ahead and open up one that I've already created. All right, and we'll go over to networking. And what we can see here is I have my network security group. So now if I wanted to add, we can see I have my network security group. This was automatically created with my virtual machine. So when you went through the deployment yesterday with Lorraine, you saw that that network security group was automatically created. But what I can have here is I have all of my inbound security rules and my outbound security rules. Now this is where I can choose to add or remove. You can see my priority level here. These are ones that are automatically created. So when I created this virtual machine, you could see that I opened up the RDP traffic. Now that overrode any of the other inbound rules that I had because it has a higher priority level. You cannot have two rules with the same priority level, but remember, you can override any of the default rules with the newer, higher priority rules. So looking back at our defense in depth graph, with network security groups, this is on the network level. Now we're moving up a level to the perimeter level. So at the perimeter level, we have the Azure firewall. Now what this is this is a fully managed cloud-based network security service that is there to protect your virtual network resources. So this is on the perimeter. You only need to worry about one because you have unlimited cloud scalability and it's already highly available. It's connected to Azure Monitor, so all of that reports that are coming in from your firewall straight into Azure Monitor. But again, this is perimeter. So it's protecting any of that inbound, outbound traffic. So whether it's for your HTTPS protocols or your non-HTTPS protocols, whether it's remote desktops, secure shell, file transfer protocol, all of this is providing outbound network level protection for all your ports, all your protocols, and all application level protection. So firewall, it's your first line of defense, within perimeter. There is also the Azure Application Gateway, and what this is a load balancer that includes a web application firewall that's providing protection from common known vulnerabilities in websites. So really, this is there to protect your HTTP traffic. So firewall, perimeter layer. Another piece of perimeter layer protection that's offered is the distributed denial of service. So with the distributed denial of services, well, before we talk what this protection is, let's talk about what an attack is. So a DDoS attack, distributed denial of service attack, is when there is an overwhelming amount of traffic sent to your Azure network or your resources, and essentially it overwhelms your resources, making them slow, or it can even take them down completely. Now, where this is different from the Azure firewall is just verifying, yep, this is traffic, this is allowed traffic, this isn't. Where the DDoS protection is going, is this valid traffic? So what it's doing is it's going through and preventing any unwanted traffic from coming in, so that way it doesn't have a chance to take down any of your services. Now there are two tiers when it comes to the DDoS protection. You have your basic tier. Now this is automatically included with Azure. So you don't have to worry about setting up your DDoS protection. That is coming right to you. But there is also the standard service. Now the standard service is not automatically included. It is an additional cost. But what this does is it's providing an additional mitigation capabilities that are very specific to your virtual network resources. So there really isn't any type of application change that you need to make, but I need you to know that this isn't something that's getting applied to your entire subscription. It is very specific to your Azure resources. It can be a little bit pricey, and so my personal recommendation is you should really only use it on business critical applications just to avoid that price. Most people find that the DDoS, the basic tier, is more than enough to meet their needs. So remember, as we go through this, defense in depth is really the overriding theme I want you to think about. We have our NSGs, our network security groups, with Azure Firewall protecting us on we have the network security groups protecting us on the network level, the Azure Firewall and DDoS protecting us on the perimeter layer. So just think of defense in depth as the overriding theme. Security is a multi-layer, multi-vector concern. Threats are coming from all over the place, and it may be places we don't expect. And they can come in strength that can surprise anyone. So just know, security is a deep and complex topic. So whatever your approach to your cloud security is, just make sure that it's an ongoing conversation and there's ongoing education because it's changing every day. Like I said, we have some of our advanced role-based classes that go into full weeks or multiple days of security. And that wraps up Module 4. That's a pretty big module. And like I said, we just scratched the surface of when it comes to security within Azure. We took a look at defense in depth and how you can secure both your network and your perimeter layer, as well as securing your secrets through Key Vault. And then finally, we looked at the Security Center, which is a great resource, and it's free within Azure to make sure that you are always up to date with the latest and greatest security features, as well as to make recommendations just to take you a little bit further. With that being said, now that we've talked about some of the security aspects, let's get into Module 5, which will talk about some of the identity features and making sure that those who are supposed to have access can get into Azure and those who can't or who aren't supposed to get into Azure don't have access. We'll also look at some governance tools within your Azure environment as well and how you can implement policies just to make sure that everybody is working in Azure the way that your company has determined. And then finally, we'll close out that module with looking at some of our privacy and trust within Azure, so that way you know how we at Microsoft are handling and protecting your data. We have a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So with Module 5, like I said, we're going to talk about identity governance, privacy, and compliance. We looked at how we're securing your Azure environment, but in Module 5, we'll look at some of the identity services that are available to you, the governance features, as well as the privacy and compliance that Microsoft offers you as a customer. So let's look at first some of those core identity services. Now, one of the first things that we need to talk about before we can talk about anything with identity services is the concept of authentication and authorization, because really, they're the foundation of all of the different identity services that are available. So first we have authentication. And what it does, it identifies the person is who they say they are. So they're going to request some type of credentials, and this could be a username, password, but really this is creating their identity. Then we have authorization. Now, once someone has been authenticated and you verified who they are who they say they are, now you're going to determine what level of access they have. And so just because they're able to come in or log into the service, they may not have access to everything. Now, the way that I look at this is I think of airport travel. So with authentication, when I go to the airport to catch a plane, I have to present my boarding pass and my license at the security desk. And they're going to look at the license and say, yep, this is Chelsea Lee, and yep, this boarding pass is valid for an upcoming flight. And so they have authenticated that I can come in and go through the security gates. Now, once I'm through the security gates, that doesn't mean I get to hop on whatever plane I'd like. If I'm going to Kansas, I can't change my mind and say, you know what, I'm going to go to Bali. No, I'm only authorized for a specific flight, which is at a specific gate, on a specific plane, at a specific time. And guess what? Even when I get on the plane, I have a specific seat. So I'm only authorized for a very specific trip. I don't get to pick and choose. So that's how I like to think of authorization and authentication. Authentication, I am who I say I am, and authorization is once I'm in the door, what can I do? Where can I go? All right. So that's really important as you get into identity services. Then with identity services, you may have heard of multi-factor authentication. Now, multi-factor authentication is just another layer of security that is available for basically protecting your Azure environment or any type of Azure or any type of environment. So essentially, it determines your identity by requiring 2 or more elements for full authentication. There's 2 things that you can ask for. Something you know, which can be a username or a password or an answer to a security question. Something you possess, which could be a mobile app, maybe it receives a notifications or a token generating device. Or it can be something you are, and this is like usually some type of biometric property. So it can be a fingerprint scan or a face scan. We see that's pretty common on a lot of phones. So what this does is when you implement multi-factor authentication, essentially it increases security because it limits the amount of credentials that could be exposed. So someone might find out your password, but it's unlikely that they would also not only have your password, but maybe have your token generating device, or they have your password and they have your face. So again, by using both of these, you're just adding that next level of protection. Now currently, Azure only supports something that you know and something that you possess. At this time, there is no biometric properties of something that you are. So an example of multi-factor authentication can be when I log into my Azure portal as a Microsoft employee, it asks not only for my username and password, but then it's going to send a notification to my phone. And then since I have my mobile phone set up, I have to log into my phone and validate, yep, this is me attempting to log in. Now this isn't part of the multi-factor authentication, but to log into my phone, it has to scan my face. So again, this multi-factor authentication just adds another level of security. You can use it as part of some of the other Azure service offerings, or it can be purchased as a standalone. So contact your Microsoft account rep to discuss more, but just know that this provides another layer of security. So now that we have the foundations of identity services, let's talk about Active Directory, or specifically Azure Active Directory. And you might be pausing going, wait, hang on, did this replace my other Active Directory? And it did not. Azure Active Directory can be used in addition to your regular Active Directory. Now, Azure Active Directory is the cloud-based identity and access management service. And it can be used for both your external resources, whether it's Office 365, the Azure portal, or a number of other software as a service applications. But you can also use it as an internal resource, whether you're controlling access on your corporate network or your intranet, or maybe you have in-house apps that you have developed for your organization. So there's a number of different services that Azure Active Directory can supply. So the first one is going to be authentication. Remember, that's proving who you are, who you say you are. And so again, some of the benefits of using this through Azure Active Directory, you can have self-service password reset, multi-factor authentication. You can even set up a custom banned password list, so that way you don't have anyone setting their password to password or password 123, but it's adding that next level of protection. It also can be used for single sign-on, which is so incredibly nice, but it also can be a curse. Because with single sign-on, I can tend to forget my password because with a single click, because, I log into my computer with my face, sometimes I may forget some of my passwords. But with single sign-on, it makes it so you only have to remember one username and one password, and you have access to multiple applications. And this is really good for your administrators, because if a user changes roles or leaves the organization, you can access modification that's tied to that single identity. So that way you're not having to run around and disable a whole bunch of different accounts. from an application management standpoint, you get to choose. You can use Azure Active Directory to manage not only your cloud apps, but your on-premises apps. And you can do this through the My Apps portal, or you might see this as the Access panel. But again, it's there to help manage all of your apps, whether you're storing them in the cloud or on premises. With business to business and business to customers, essentially you get to manage your guest users or your customers, basically how they access your corporate data if they're a vendor, or as a customer, you get to control how they sign in, sign up, or how basically they manage their profile with your app services. And then finally, with device management, that manages how your cloud or your on-premises devices access your corporate data. Now, when we talk about access, we have this concept or this tool called conditional access used with Azure Active Directory. And essentially what this does, it allows your organization to have different identity signals to determine what apps, what data users can access depending on the type of user they are, their group membership, where they're located, what device, the application, if there's any type of risk. So essentially, conditional access uses Azure Active Directory to make decisions based on these organizational policies. So think about them at a very simple level. They're if-then statements. If I am logging in from the corporate network on a corporate computer, then I can access the data. Now, if I am logging in on a corporate device, but I am on a different network, then require multi-factor authentication. If they pass, then allow access to the data. Or if a user is not allowed in, they're not authorized to log in from a certain device or a certain location, then you can block that access. So essentially, let's say, for example, you have a payroll manager. They want to access the payroll application. Well, they're required to perform multi-factor authentication to access it. So this allows your administrators to empower your employees to be productive wherever they want while still protecting the organization's assets. So this allows you to apply the right access controls when needed to keep your organization secure and really to stay out of your users' way when it's not needed. So conditional access is just another great tool within Azure Active Directory. So let's now talk about, we've looked at some of identity services. Let's look at some of the governance methodologies that are built into Azure. Now that we've had a chance to look at some of our other identity services, such as Azure Active Directory, let's explore a little bit of role-based access control, or you might hear it also as RBAC. So role-based access control provides fine-grained access management for your Azure resources, which gives you as an administrator control to grant the rights that your users need to do their jobs. Now, role-based access control is included in all Azure subscriptions, so there is no additional price for that. But when you think about the roles within Azure, you may want to segregate duties. And what that means is, a user, for example, may only be able to manage virtual machines in a single subscription, where you may have another user who's there to manage virtual networks. Or let's say, for example, you have a database administrator and they manage all the SQL databases in a single subscription. Essentially what you're doing is you're giving your users enough access to do their job, but no more. And that's really key when it comes to role-based access controls, is that you only want to grant the amount of access that a user needs to perform their jobs. So instead of trying to give everyone unrestricted permissions and saying, run wild, you want to be able to protect your resources in your subscription. So you only want to allow certain actions at a certain scope level. And, this is so important. You're granting the lowest level of privilege that they need to do their work. You can always add permissions. Sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to take them away. So let's go ahead and look at what the different roles are. Let's switch back into the portal. Now, with role-based access controls, you can apply this at the subscription level, the management group level, the resource group level, or individual resources. I am going to work on the subscription level. So I have my subscriptions right here under my Azure services. And in my demo account, I have a single subscription applied. So let's go ahead and click on that. And your access control is managed underneath overview. You'll see it on no matter what resource. You'll see access control or IAM. So I always think of it as I am who I say I am. But this is where you can add different roles. So let's go ahead and look at the different role assignments that you can add. So when you select a role, you have a choice of owner. So you can see this grants full access. So this is doing absolutely everything. I would be very, very, very careful with owner because then they can kick you out and take away your access. Whereas contributor, it basically allows you to have access to all resources, but you can't assign any roles. So if you needed someone with, all power, but you don't want them to have the ability to change roles, contributor might be a good one. Whereas with reader, you can't make any changes, but you can view and you can see there are a number of different roles already built in. Now, if you don't see a role that works for you, you can actually even create your own roles. All right. And then you can assign, at what access level do you want them to have. Now, say for example, I wanted to add a contributor. Now this is my demo account. So I am going to add my work email address. And you can see that this user will be sent an email that enables them to collaborate on the default directory. And so I'm going to go ahead and select my email. I'm going to select save. So that sent an email to my work email address letting me know that I now have access as a contributor to this entire subscription, which means that I can access all the resource groups and all the resources in there. Now, for example, if I wanted to look at my role assignments and I maybe wanted to change the role, I can remove. So if I wanted to remove this role assignment, great. Now, even though I have that email, I've now just revoked my role as a contributor. And you can look at all the different roles that are available, add a different role. So if there was one that was like, a role, these are all built in, it doesn't meet, I can choose to add and have that customized access. And again, you can do this at the subscription level, you can do this at the resource group level, and you can also do it at the individual resources level. So this is just one way how to, again, add that fine-grained access management to your environment. All right. Another really great governance tool that is built into Azure is going to be resource locks. Now, as you add different contributors and editors and readers, and maybe you even add an owner, resource locks are such a great tool from preventing any type of accidental deletion or modification, because one thing that you need to know, when you delete a resource or a resource group, there is no going back. There is no undo. There is no recycle button. You cannot go get it back. So accidental deletions are a very big deal, or accidental modifications are a very big deal because you can't undo them. So how do you protect your resources? You protect them through resource locks. And so with resource locks, you cannot delete, which essentially the only thing that you can't do, you can read them, you can update them, you can change them, you can add to them, you just can't delete them. So it protects from your accidental deletion, but not so much from the accidental modification. So that's where we get into our read-only locks. With your read-only locks, this makes it so you can read it, you can view it, but you can't make changes, you can't add anything to it, can't remove anything, and you sure as heck can't delete it. So let's look at what that looks like in the portal. So going back into the portal, go back to the home page. Let's actually look at the virtual machine level. No, changed my mind. We're going to go to the resource group level. So I'm going to go over here to my resource groups. And let's go to my AZ900. All right. So we can see in this resource group, all I have is my Key Vault demo that we made earlier. But I am going to add a lock. And the way that you add a lock is down here on the bottom under Settings, select Locks, and I am going to select Add. Now, looking at the lock type, remember you have two, read only and delete. So let's start with delete because that's the least restrictive. So I'm going to just call it do not delete. You can add any notes if you want. Now, because I am an admin and my access allows me to add and delete locks, I can add and delete locks to any resources. Again, depending on the access, the role-based access that you provide to your users, they may be able to add locks, they may be able to remove them. Again, that is a control thing. Now, when I point out with the resource groups, one of the things I want you to understand is when you apply a lock at a resource group level or a subscription level, it does have that parent-child inheritance relationship. So if you apply something at a subscription level, it will flow down to all the resource groups and then all the resources. So since I'm applying a lock at the resource group level, I have now locked all my resources in my resource group. So let's go back to the overview here. And I put a do not delete. So what that means is I can go add anything. So let's go ahead and add a storage account because those are nice and quick to deploy. So I'm going to add a storage account. I am going to go to my AZ900. I'm going to just say lock storage so we know what it is. Oh, no capitals. Let's forget that. All right. And I am just going to go ahead and go through validation to deploy this because, again, we're not using this for anything, just more to test the lock. So I am able to submit the deployment. The deployment is in progress. And let's go back to our resource group because by the time we get there, it should finish up deploying. Oh, right, and I got a deployment successful. Let's just go ahead and refresh, make sure. Oh. Go to resource. We have it. All right, perfect. So that was there. It let me create it in that resource group. There we go. So we can see that I was able to create a resource in the resource group. And that's because it's only a delete lock. Let's try deleting it. Now, you see, it is giving me this big, massive warning. Remember what I told you. When you delete it, it's gone. You're not getting it back. So it wants to make sure that I understand this. And I actually have to type out the name of the resource group to say, I understand. So I'm going to select delete. Oh, won't let me. It's because it has a lock. All right. So you can see I can make changes. But let's go edit this lock real fast. Let's change it to read only. All right. Let's go try to add a storage account again. I'm going to go ahead and add a storage account. Have my subscription. Let's select my resource group. Oh, it's stopping me. This resource group is read only. So I can't even get to validation process before it stops me. And that's because I have that read only lock. Let's just do one final test. Go to my resource groups. We'll select AZ900. Delete resource group. There's that warning. I cannot emphasize it enough. It will go bye-bye forever. So let's do AZ900. Delete. Oh, it won't let me. Now again, I can go and remove those locks because of my access, but again, you can control your users to control whether or not they can make any changes on the locks. All right. So going back to our slide deck, just remember adding locks to your resources are such an important thing if you want to prevent any type of accidental deletion or modification, and it's a great governance tool. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at tags. We've had the option to look at this a couple times. You looked at it yesterday with Lorraine. With tags, again, this is a great tool when it comes to reporting or billing. And essentially what you're doing is you're adding metadata for your Azure resources. Now, tags do not have that parent-child inheritance relationship. So if you tag a resource group, all of the items below it will not have those tags. So instead of having to go through and manually add tags, that's where taking advantage of templates is really great, because you can have all of those tags automatically built in. Now, where this is really helpful, let's say, for example, switch back to the portal. Let's go take a look. Let me remove that lock real fast. That way if I need to make any changes. All right, so let's go and look at this storage account, for example. Now we don't have anything in the storage account at the moment, but underneath overview, I can select tags. And this is where I can add that name value pair. So if I wanted to do cost center, and maybe it's 5642 is the cost center, we can have the manager. And let's say the manager's name is Blake. So that way, when I add these tags, if I then get my bill and I go, whoa, this bill is crazy expensive. What happened? And I want to go in and I see, 5642, that cost center spent a little bit more than they should have. What is that? Why is that? And then I drill down even deeper and I see that Blake, the manager, is the one who has spent more. Well, maybe we have a conversation about budget. Maybe we put additional policies in place. Maybe we change access. So again, this is really good for organizing your billing, your reporting. Essentially, it's organizing all of your resources based off these tags, and that name value pair allows you to filter on those. In general, you can have up to 50 tags per resource, but if you're adding a lot of tags, highly recommend that you take advantage of those templates, those JSON files. All right, so mentioned it a couple times, but we have Azure policy. So what Azure policy does, this is a really common question that comes up, is how can I prevent my users from maybe selecting a really expensive virtual machine? Or how can I prevent my users from using a SKU that doesn't meet our company standards, or perhaps our company policies, or I don't want to deploy outside of these regions? Well, Azure policy is what's going to be your best support for that, because essentially you get to set what your organizational standards are, and these policies will automatically enforce those across your subscription. Now, like with everything else, you have a choice whether or not you want to apply it at the subscription level, management group level, resource level, or a resource group level. So it is up to you. There are a number of pre-built policies, basically the definition of the policy. So whether you wanted to have like an allowed storage account SKU, maybe it's only specific resources. And again, you can make it only specific people can deploy, allowed virtual machine SKUs. Again, there's a lot of sample or built-in policies that you can choose from. So let's actually go to our resource group. I'm just going to back out to our AZ900 resource group. And I don't have any policies associated with it, but let's actually create a whole policy that applies to the entire subscription. So I actually have it up here in my recently accessed services, but you can find it in the search bar or the portal doc. So let's go ahead and select policy. And this is where you can see your overall policy scores. Now, in my current Azure environment, I don't have anything really crazy in here. You can see I have one existing policy. I'm actually not compliant with it. And I want to point out one thing with your compliance score. When you deploy a new policy, it will not go back and stop anything that's out of compliance. So if I, for example, actually, let's go ahead and build it out. So let's create an assignment and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I am going to assign a new policy to my entire subscription. So I am selecting my scope here. I can choose to do it at a resource group level if I'd like, but nope, I'm going to apply it to my entire resource group. I can then choose to add any exclusions if like maybe, for example, I wanted to exclude my AI 100. I can do that. But for this one, nope, I'm going to include all of my resource groups. Now, with the policy definition, I'm going to use a pre-built-in definition. So I am going to actually look specifically for a location. So I'm going to just type in location, built-in, allowed location. So you can see this is basically restricts where I can deploy resources. So I'm going to select allowed locations. I'm going to leave the name. Now, this is where I'm going to select what locations I can actually deploy in. And I'm going to choose Japan West. All right. Now, everything that I have done up to this point, I usually deploy in East US. Because I am now saying I can only deploy in Japan West, when it runs its compliance check, it will not stop all my other resources that are deployed outside of Japan West. However, they will be marked as out of compliance. Moving forward, however, if I try to deploy any resource in Japan West, it will stop me. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to hit review and create. Now, that policy has been deployed. Now, because it was just started, let me go back to the policy. Oops. And I go to overview. You'll see that it says not started. So right now it says I'm 100% compliant. That's not the case. Probably we'll go back and check in about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. It would show, I probably have a number of my resources that are out of compliance. But you see that it's not started. So all of my old resources will be showed out of compliant, but let's actually try to create a new one. So let's create another storage account. They're nice and easy. I'm going to do add. We're going to add this to my AZ900. We'll do our policy test storage 1. Let's see if that's not taken. All right. I'm going to just leave everything as is. Now it's going to say validation passed, but look what happens when I try to deploy in East US. It's going to try to go through deployment. Ooh, it won't let me deploy. And you see what's going on right here? It says my deployment's failed because I am deploying in a non-allowed location. So even though all my other ones, we see my status is forbidden here, even though all my other resources will be out of compliant, because I've now set up that policy of that allowed location, I can't go back and add anything after that. All right. So this is really great because it's going to automatically manage your Azure environment based on the rules and the parameters that you set up. All right. So moving on through governance, let's go ahead and talk about Azure Blueprints. Now this is something, if you are part of the DevOps team, you will love Azure Blueprints, because essentially what it does is it makes a blueprint of your Azure environment, and it saves all of your existing role assignments, the policy assignments like what we just set up, any templates, any resource groups, and it allows you to deploy test environments or development environments very quickly, where you're not having to go through the entire build out of setting up an Azure environment. So this is really good when you have to test different things. This allows you specifically when you're looking at compliance or you have your already built-in components. Again, it's just there to help orchestrate different Azure resources specifically for your development team. One thing I want to point out is Azure Blueprints are a little bit different from your Azure Resource Manager templates. And Lorraine took a look at those yesterday with you. So one thing I want to point out, so when you deploy an ARM template, there's no relationship with the deployed resource and where it came from. But with the Azure Blueprint, every deployment is going to be tied to that Blueprint package. So there is a relationship with the resources, and they're going to be continuously maintained even after deployment. And again, this is really important when it comes to auditing and tracking the capabilities of your development environments. So for this one, I believe AZ300 goes into more detail on Azure Blueprints if you'd like to learn more about that. The last thing before we get into some of our privacy and compliance, I want to talk about the Cloud Adoption Framework. Now, this is a great tool if you are new to Azure and you would like support or best practices on how to implement Azure in your own environment. So essentially, this is the Microsoft approach to implementing Azure. And there's so many tools from both employees, partners, customers that have been all put into one Cloud Adoption Framework tool that will provide guidance as you go through. This is something that can be really helpful if you've never worked in the cloud before, or if you have a large workload, or you just don't know where to start. You know, do I want to do a lift and shift? Do I want to re-architect to make my applications PaaS compatible? You know, what do I need? So this will help you go through everything that you need to set up your Azure environment. Highly recommend. Now that we've looked at some of the the governance, I want to talk about the compliance, privacy, and the data protection standards that are offered to you and your data when it's stored in Azure. So one of the first things that we have to talk about is security, privacy, and compliance are at the foundation of everything we do here at Microsoft. So everything that we design, every service that we design, security is built. Security is part of that development process. So we want to make sure that we're always providing you with the latest and greatest security tools. And we took a look at some of those in the last module. Next is with privacy. You know, we want to make sure that not only we're meeting our contractual obligations to you, but we also want to be transparent. And we'll take a look at the Trust Center in a little bit, so that way you can see, you know, we provide all of our audit reports where these are third-party audit reports that you can download and see what we're doing, where we provide other resources. So not only we want to give you the control over your data and provide you with that privacy, but we're transparent in what we're doing with it. And last but not least, you know, we are global. That's one of the benefits of going with the cloud computing provider. But we are very aware of local laws, regulations, and we want to provide a comprehensive coverage with all of our compliance offerings. Now, with our compliance offerings, we have quite a few. So when we look at our documentation, Azure actually provides the most comprehensive set of any compliance offerings from any cloud provider. And I mean, this is including our certificates, our attestations, all of that. So no matter what cloud provider you're going with, there's a couple of questions that you need to ask. One, how compliant is the cloud provider when it comes to handling sensitive data? You should know that. Next, you know, what are the services that are offered by that cloud provider when it comes to compliance? And how can you deploy your own cloud-based solutions and still remain compliant? Because it is, at the end of the day, your responsibility to make sure that your resources are compliant. Your cloud provider, though, is going to help support that. Now, when it comes to Azure's compliance documentation, like we said, it provides the most comprehensive set. And we have global compliance offerings, U.S. government offerings, industry, and regional. And you can actually see all of that in our docs.microsoft. But when we take a look at the Trust Center, I'll show how you can pull up all of that compliance documentation. All right. Like we said, privacy is also huge. So not only we want to make sure we're compliant, but we want to make sure that you as our customer or anyone who interacts with Microsoft knows what we do with your data, how we process it, why we're processing it. So all of that can be found in the privacy statement. And pull that up again, the Trust Center, which we'll look at, will have all of this information. So not only with the privacy statement, we also have our data protection addendum. So all of our terms will show you, you know, what we're collecting, the licensing terms with all of your Microsoft programs or software that you purchase, and then how we are protecting your data. So let's go ahead and look at that Trust Center. I've mentioned that a couple times now. This is your home base for everything related to privacy, trust, and compliance. Not only that, there is curated reading material or documentation or reports specific for those who may be in manager roles, administrator roles, anybody who works in risk, legal. There's a lot of great information. It's also where you can access all of your compliance documents, the privacy statement. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Trust Center. All right. So the way that you get to the Trust Center is by going to www.microsoft.com/Trust Center. And let's just take a look at a couple of the items that we looked at first. So we talked about our compliance documentation. So if I go up here to compliance and I click on compliance offerings, you can then search for all of the different compliance offerings that we offer through Azure. Now, one of the things I do want to have you know is that not every Azure service offers every single compliance offering. For example, we do have a separated instance of Azure specifically for U.S. government. So non-U.S. government Azure will not offer a FedRAMP, for example, but it's not needed outside of U.S. government. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. But that is where you can find all of your compliance offerings. Going back to the Trust Center, we also have our privacy statement. So this is where you can go and actually check out the full privacy overview. And you can read the privacy statement, any of the data that we collect, as well as additional resources. So if you want a little extra bedtime reading and understanding where your data comes from, the Trust Center has all of that here for you. The other thing, like I said, this is where we have our compliance scores, all of our audit reports, all of that is available to you to download to read. And again, like I said, these are third-party audit reports that allow you to see how Microsoft is stacking up. Because again, you want to make sure that not only are you compliant, but your cloud provider is compliant as well. So this is really a great site to come in and explore. You can read from the blog. Brad Smith is also a really great person to check out his blog. Again, just so much information and additional resources. So definitely the Trust Center is somewhere that you want to check out. It's specifically if your role requires you to protect your data and information, but I think it's good for everyone to be aware. Last two things I want to discuss before we wrap up this module. We have two separate instances of Azure. The first one being, like I mentioned, is our U.S. government services. Now, this is a completely separate physical instance of Azure. So this isn't connected with any of the other data centers, and you can only access it if you are authorized to. So me, as Chelsea, right now, I could not deploy in our Azure regions. Part of the reason that they're separate is from a privacy and a security standpoint, but they also have their own compliance offerings. So like I said, we have the FedRAMP, the NSIT, very specific to either state, local, or federal government. And then lastly, we have our China region. So because China has their own data residency requirements, their own compliance requirements, one of that is that in order to have Azure cloud services, that it has to be operated through 21 ViaNet. And so again, this is all physically separated from the rest of Azure, and it's operated through 21 ViaNet. And this ensures that all the data stays within China and meets all their data compliance regulatories as well as data residency. That brings us to the end of Module 5, Azure Pricing and Support. And you might be asking yourself, like, hang on, Chelsea, I already have Azure, or my organization takes care of that. I don't need to figure out the pricing for Azure. And that may be true for your day-to-day job. However, if you are interested in taking the AZ 900 exam, you will need to understand how you can manage costs, the different factors that impact cost, as well as leveraging different service level agreements in products and service and life cycles within Azure. So this may not apply to your regular job, but for the AZ900 exam, you will need to know these. Let's take a look at first how you can plan and manage your costs. There are 6 factors that impact the cost of your service. So the first 3 that I want to talk about are going to be resource type, services, and location. So those are going to be the main things that drive your cost. So the first one is going to be the resource type. Now, different resources have different costs associated with them. I mean, just think about all the different resources that you created yesterday with Lorraine. You created a storage account, you created virtual networks, you created a virtual machine. Today, we created a storage account, we created a key vault. Like, there's different prices for different resources. So depending on what resource type that you select, it will have a different cost. They also have a usage meter that tracks how much, down to the second of when that resource was used. So number 1, resource type. Next is service. And that service really is, what kind of customer are you? Now there's 3 different customer types. The first one is web direct. Imagine that you just went to azure.com and you said, sign me up and give me an account. Well, that makes you a web direct customer. Usually with web direct customers, there is no type of discount associated with that. So you're paying full retail pricing. And with that, it's the consumption-based billing where you will get a bill at the end of the month for the resources that you consumed. Next, we have our enterprise customers. Now with enterprise customers, these are usually larger organizations who have negotiated a contract with Azure where they have said, we will spend at least this much on Azure on an annual basis. And because of that amount, there's usually a discount associated with that. And instead of being billed on a monthly basis, they're usually billed on an annual basis. So the difference between WebDirect and Enterprise is usually the larger organization. They're billed annually instead of monthly, whereas WebDirect, you're just signing up as an individual or maybe a small business, and you're paying that retail pricing and it's billed on a monthly basis. Then we have our cloud solution providers. Now this is going to be a third-party partner who will work with you directly to set up your Azure account. With this, the billing, you're not only paying for the Azure services, but you're also paying for the cloud solution provider's time as well in their work. So the billing actually isn't through Azure, it's all through the cloud solution provider. Normally, that one does have a slightly higher charge because again, your cloud solution provider, they have their business and the work that they're charging you for on top of the Azure services. So that is going to impact your costs, the type of customer you are. Finally, is going to be location. Location is going to impact your costs because yesterday with Lorraine, you took a look at all the different regions all over the globe. I mean, we have over 60 regions in 140 countries. Every country has different costs. Switzerland, for example, does have a higher cost to operate a data center there. So as a result, it does cost more to run your resources in Switzerland or Australia. But for example, East US is actually a lower cost region. So where you deploy your resources is going to impact the cost. Our recommendation is if you can deploy your resources in a lower cost region, definitely do that because that will save you money in the long run. Now, so when we talk about resource type, services, and locations, those have a definite direct impact on your spend or on your cost. But we also need to take a look at bandwidth. So depending on how your data transfers are going. So there is actually something that we call billing by zones, and different regions and geographies are organized into zones. So essentially, whether or not you have outbound or inbound data transfers, outside of your zones, there can be additional charges. So for example, if I was transferring from West US to Australia, so if I have resources deployed in region, those outbound charges from the US to Australia, that's going to incur charges. So again, if possible, unless you have to avoid deploying your resources outside of billing zones to cut back on costs. Some of the ways that you can save money, first is with your reserved instances. So with Azure reservations, we'll take a look at this when we go to the pricing calculator, but essentially you can commit to whether you want to basically prepay for a 1-year or a 3-year plan for your products. And essentially this can actually have a massive savings. I've seen it up to like 70 something %, but essentially instead of doing the pay as you go, you say, you know what, I'm going to need this virtual machine for at least the next 3 years. And I don't want you to think that you are locked in forever with that virtual machine. Like say something changes. Say something that like, ooh, I ended up not needing it. You can downgrade. There is a very minimal fee. It's not anything crazy. It's not like you're trying to get out of like a crazy hard contract. But there just is a minimal fee and you can either choose to remove yourself from that reservation. We've discussed that a couple times. You looked at it yesterday with Lorraine when you created your virtual machine. And then today we looked at it with the dedicated host where you could leverage that benefit. But essentially what this is if you already have a license, whether it's from your on-premises, you can bring it with you to Azure. That way you're not paying for the use of that license. So that can also save you a little bit money as well. So let's just very quickly review the 6 factors that impact cost. The resource type. Remember, whatever resource you select, whether it's a virtual machine or a SQL database or a storage account, they cost different. Services. Services impact not only how you're billed, so whether it's you're billed directly from Azure on an annual basis, monthly basis, or a third party, but it also impacts your rates depending on your customer type. Your location impacts cost because remember, not all regions cost the same to operate. So when you can, select a lower cost region. When it comes to bandwidth, you're going to pay for those outbound transfers. So if you are crossing billing zones, there will be a charge. So if you have the ability to try to keep all of your regions in the same billing zone. But there's other ways to save money, whether you're choosing it through reserved instances or you're taking advantage of the hybrid benefit. Let's go ahead and put that all together in the pricing calculator. You know, I hear it. I hear you going through your computer screen saying like, Chelsea, how do I know what all of this is going to cost? I just want to know a number. Well, the pricing calculator can provide you with that number. Now, I want to point out one thing before we go into the pricing calculator. This is an estimate. It is not an official, this is an invoice. It's going to help you estimate your costs. Because again, it can vary based off of country, billing, taxes, customer type. There's a couple other nuances that go into figuring out your final cost. But this is really good when you're trying to figure out which product should I select, which region should I select. So let's go ahead and look at the pricing calculator. So the pricing calculator here, let me zoom in so it's a little bit easier for you to see. It should look a little bit familiar. It looks a little bit like the All Services menu from the portal. And that's because this allows you to basically put together an estimate that you can save or export to Excel of all the services that you're looking to buy. So let's go ahead and go to Compute and let's price out a virtual machine. All right, so let's go ahead and view. And again, you can add multiple, but I'm just going to do a pricing for a virtual machine. So not changing anything, just as is how the calculator popped up. What you will see here is that the pricing for a virtual machine with an operating system Windows in the US region running 730 hours a month as a D2 will cost you $152 a month. Let's talk about some of our things that impact costs. So the first one, resource type. You know, virtual machines have a different cost versus, let's just for giggles, let's add a storage account. And so this is going to add it to the same thing. So a storage account costs $20 a month. So just by looking at the virtual machine itself, there's a different cost. So resource types impact cost. Second, let's look at location. So let's just play around with this a little bit. So West US, that's the region closest to me, but let's go to East US and where I've been deploying. So let's do, we're at 152.57. Let's see what East US does. It drops it down a little bit. Now, you know, I always pick East US. All right. Let's go, let's go to Norway. Okay, Norway's a little bit more expensive. Switzerland, let's see what Switzerland is. 172. Okay, so Switzerland's cheaper than Norway. Australia? Okay, Australia East isn't that bad. How about Australia Southeast? Same price. So not only are you wanting to deploy your resources close to your customers, but again, when you have the opportunity to choose a low-cost region, that's the best thing that you can do. All right, so as far as the operating system goes, so if I choose Windows, you can see here I have the Azure Hybrid benefit. So if I already have a Windows license, I can say, nope, I'm bringing that with me from my on-premises environment. All right, so we have our operating system. I'm going to click a standard tier. Essentially, I would recommend you're picking your standard for anything in production. If you're picking a basic or low priority, this will be in the event that Azure needs additional resources. They can actually take your resources offline. For production, making sure that you're selecting standard. All right, now again with the resource types, this is where you can select your different SKUs. I'm going to stick with just the good old D2. Now let's play with the number of hours it's running. So if I wanted to run it, half the time of the month, you can see that lowers the price. 730 is the full month. If I wanted one virtual machine versus 4 virtual machines. Let's just stick with one. Now you can see where we have our reservation instances here. So if I reserve it for 1 year, drops it down. I get a 40% discount. If I do it for 3 years, drops it down even more. All right. So again, there are ways for you to save money. Now, when you want, you can actually export this and you can share this as an Excel document. You can share it with others on your team. So I'm going to just head ahead and save. Oh, I'm not logged in. But if I was logged in with an Azure account that has pricing, I can actually save this estimate to my account. Now you'll see here that these are not your actual quotes. It just depends because by day, there could be a change in the service, your currency, and the key thing here, type of agreement. So type of agreement, what does that mean? Customer type. Are you web direct? Are you enterprise? Are you working with a cloud solutions provider? So again, all of this is going to just be an estimate. You can work with your Microsoft rep to get a more clear estimate or a better, more specific quote. All right. But this is a really great tool if you're curious about roughly how much is that going to cost me. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, wait, is that really going to save me money compared to doing it in my on-premises data center? And that's a really great question. So we have what's called the total cost of ownership calculator. And this total cost of ownership calculator, you do need to have some information about your workload. So if you don't have information on how many servers you have, your databases and storage, plus your cost, electricity, rent, this may not be the best tool for you. However, if you do have access to that information, you can actually go in, plug in all of that information, including your rent, your electricity bill, and it will actually compare the cost of running that exact same data center in Azure. So what we can see here is from the report, we're looking about we have most of our costs coming from the data center itself. So this is your labor fees, your rent, all of that, with very little coming from the actual compute side. If we were to switch it over to Azure then, running this exact same workload, you no longer are paying for that data center because again, when you work with Azure or any public cloud computing, you are not paying for that physical infrastructure, or you are taking advantage of having someone else run that physical infrastructure for you. And so even though your networking, compute and storage costs go up, it still is less than running it in your on-premises database. So if you have that information, highly recommend that you check out the total cost of ownership calculator because it will let you know whether or not you can save money by switching your workload into Azure. Now, with all the different costs in Azure, you might be saying, okay, cool, I've estimated it. I know that I want to run my workload in Azure, but there's still more that I want to do. And I want to, how much I am spending. Because remember, we set up that tag earlier so we can track by manager. I want to set budgets. How do I set up all those alerts? And the Azure Cost Management is the tool for you. The Azure Cost Management tool will allow you to look at all your different billing reports. And if you've taken advantage of tags, you can drill down even deeper. If you have budgets, you can actually set budgets to not let certain users or certain subscriptions go over a certain spend. Or you can have it set up alerts, so where you can alert managers or anybody's in charge of a project as you start to approach that budget. So in my account, I have a $150 budget. Every time I log in, it lets me know how much of my budget is left. And just like when we looked at Azure Monitor, we have that cost management piece. So there's going to make recommendations on how you can save money. And I think that's the big question with anything in Azure. You're looking at how you can minimize your costs. So first thing, go through a cost analysis. Use the pricing tools that are provided to you. Remember, even though that they're estimates, they get you pretty dang close. So the pricing calculator and the total cost of ownership calculators are really important with just, first understanding, all right, what kind of budget are we looking in? Now, once you figure out that budget, you have Azure Monitor and Azure Advisor that are going to make recommendations. We want to be able to save you money because the better it is for more you like Azure, the more likely you are to use it. So we're not trying to price gouge you. We want to make sure that you're optimized and you're spending smartly. So once you've gone through Monitor and Azure Advisor, use spending limits. Don't just give everybody free range. We've talked about role-based access control and all different ways to govern your Azure environment. Do the same thing with spending. Set up those spending limits, and that way through Monitor, you can get alerts. When you have the ability to save money, definitely take advantage of Azure Reservations or Azure Hybrid Benefits. Those are really good ways to save additional money. We saw how it could chop your cost in half. Imagine if you were able to use a combination of the two. As far as when you're deploying your locations, while it may be super cool to deploy your VM or your resources to Switzerland or Poland, unless you need to, it could be an added cost that's unnecessary. So when you can choose low-cost locations, do it. And, keep up to date, whether you're staying in touch with your Azure account rep or you keeping up on the updates page, which I'll show in a little bit. Just know what's going on with Azure customers and your Azure subscription. That way, if there's any changes or maybe there's different ways for you to save money, you're aware of it. And then last but not least, I kind of already talked about it, but is applying those tags, those cost owners. Remember we had that manager, Blake, who overspent. Well, because I had the tags, I was able to identify him and then set up spending limits for him. So there's a lot of different ways that you can help minimize your costs in Azure, but it takes the work on your part to make sure that you're up to date. But we have all those tools ready for you. So know for the exam that you do need to understand how costs are incurred. I would definitely make sure that you know the 6 factors that impact costs and then the tools that are available to you for estimation. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the service level agreements and service life cycles with Azure as we finish up this module. So the first thing is, what is a service level agreement? Now, we've talked about high availability and uptimes and what happens if you're down. Well, essentially, when you sign up for Azure or you deploy certain Azure services, there is a service level agreement. And that service level agreement is a contractual obligation that Microsoft is committing that this specific service will be up and running a minimum time per month. And so if, for example, a service is down beyond that minimum agreed time, well, then a credit is then applied to your account. Now, one thing to know that every single service has its own SLA associated with it. So it's not just one general SLA. But free and preview items do not offer SLAs. So this does not apply to free and preview. So let's look at what some of those SLAs are. An SLA can range from 99% up to what we call 5 nines. So 99.999%. And you can see the higher the SLA, the maximum downtime that you will experience per month goes down. Let's just say, for example, what we call 3 nines, that 99.9%, the maximum downtime per month with that type of service with that SLA can be up to 43 minutes and 49 seconds. Now, that doesn't mean that you will be down for 43 minutes and 49 seconds every single month, but that means that Microsoft is meeting their contractual obligation for availability as long as they're under 43 minutes and 49 seconds a month. But maybe your service, your product, your resource can't have that type of, 43 minutes. If it went down for 43 minutes, that would cause chaos. So maybe you need to build up a higher SLA. So 5 nines, for example, that one's not a lot of products offer 5 nines, but in that case, it's 26 seconds a month. So when you're looking at building in your resiliency and your availability into your products and services, just make sure that you are aware of what kind of downtimes that you can tolerate. Now, there's different things that impact your SLA. One, the more services that you add to your solution, the more complex it gets. And because you have a more complexity, the SLA is going to go down. Because if everything's a fraction, as you multiply, the fractions are going to get smaller. And if you choose a free service or a preview feature, those won't have SLAs associated with them. But if you want to raise your SLA, your service level agreement, yesterday Lorraine showed you availability zones. That's one way to increase your SLA when it comes to virtual machines. Same thing with building in redundancies into your systems. So if you're curious what your SLA will look like if you have multiple services, that's what we call a composite SLA. With the composite SLA, the way to figure that is you just simply multiply the SLA for your first resource times your second resource. And you can do this as many as you want. Mathematically, when you multiply a fraction with another fraction, it is never going to equal 100%. It's just not possible. But there's ways for you to improve your SLA, again, through that redundancy and those availability zones. You shouldn't have to do any type of calculations on your exam, but just know that as far as your SLAs goes, that's important for you as you build out your services. Now, I told you that preview and free services do not have SLAs associated with them. And this is really important to know. Please do not put preview features in your production environment. I'm serious here. Because they do not have an SLA, preview features, these are features that are still in test. Maybe they're being evaluated by different Azure customers. Essentially, they have not been released to what we call generally available. So this is still in preview mode. When it's in preview, not only does it not have an SLA, but there is no guarantee that it will make it to general availability. So sometimes it might disappear. And if you put preview in production and it disappears, oh my goodness, things can break, things go terrible, it's chaos, everybody's freaking out. Just don't do it, please. So we don't put preview things in production. But with the preview program, this is a really cool opportunity for you to see features that are to come. Sometimes Microsoft is taking that feedback directly that you submit and making those changes and releasing new features. So things go into preview, gives a chance to get feedback, fix any bugs, and then once it's been through full testing, it moves to generally available. And after that's completed, then, then if it has an SLA associated with it, it will get one, and then you can put it in production. If you're curious, like where you are on the status of the preview features, this is where you can actually check. There is an Azure updates page, and let me actually pull that up for you. So the Azure updates page allows you to either subscribe to the RSS feed, and this is where you can search keywords of any products that you're using. So if you see a preview feature that you love and you're like, where is it? You can search for it here, and you can see whether it's now available, if it's in preview, or if they're currently working on it. And again, you can browse by feature or the different update types. So this is a really great feed to save if you're curious where you are in the update, in the preview pipeline. But just know, as long as it's in preview, does not have any type of SLA associated with it, and you do not put it in production. So there we go. You made it. You made it to the end of Module 6, our final module for all of AZ900. And this could be a brand new module to you if you've never priced out Azure before. So remember, the pricing calculator is your friend. If you're ever curious roughly what it's going to cost, go out to that pricing calculator and get that estimate. Same thing with the total cost of ownership estimate. If you're looking at making that transition from your on-premises database or your data center into Azure. Great tools that are available, and as well as understanding that the factors that impact your cost. A couple of other things that we took a look at is the updates within Azure. How do you know when the latest and greatest new features are coming out, so you can subscribe to that RSS feed. But that's everything that we have for you. I'm so happy that you were able to join us for 2 days full of information preparing you for the AZ900 exam. If you need a quick refresher or if you wanted to test out your knowledge, I encourage you to check out the full learning path that has all of the information covered from both Part 1 with Lorraine and everything that I covered with you today at aka.ms/azfunpath. There is supplemental reading, documentation, videos, as well as those handy dandy knowledge checks. But as you prepare for the exam, I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and I can't wait to see those badges that you earn and you post them to your LinkedIn and other social media. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon.